Is Craig on yet? Well,
No, he actually disappeared.
oh, okay.
So give me 1 second to finish the live stream setup,
Sure.
and hopefully he's back by then. He said he is having a computer issue and will be on momentarily. He just
Okay.
texted me that. But if you want, while we wait on him, I can give the
Yes.
normal meeting instructions for anybody who it's their first time.
Why don't you go ahead?
All right. Well, welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, we're glad that you are tuned in. You'll notice that you're muted, and you're going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting. The only folks who will be unmuted at any time are the co-chairs, Craig and Chuck, and any presenters who are making their presentations. Following each presentation, and as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon and pressing the raise hand button. It's not the wave or the thumbs up. Those will disappear. Only press the button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support only to help with the Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of any of the co-chairs or presenters. They will never see those chats. You'll just be wasting your time. So if you're having problems, you can chat me if you need any technical support. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you can go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand button there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen. There's a lot of folks in the room. We may miss you and may not see you. So if you're having problems, chat me. I'm here for support. And now I see Craig is here, so we can hand it over to him and you and get the meeting started.
Okay, good. Welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Transportation Committee of Community Board 8. Happy to see everyone here. I'm Chuck Warren, one of the co-chairs, and Craig Later, my other co-chair, I see signed in. And we're going to change the agenda slightly here, that since we have people from the MTA to make a presentation and also DOT, we're going to start with those presentations first. So Craig, I don't know whether you want to say anything, but we can start with the MTA presentation if you don't.
No, let's move right ahead.
Okay, we have people from the MTA here to talk about the stroller pilot program on the M31 bus route.
Let me see if we have our folks from the MTA here. I think we have Howie Levine. And Howie, is anyone joining you?
Good evening, Will. I believe Danny Randell is joining me. I don't know if you see him as a participant yet.
I do not.
Just give me one moment to bring up this slideshow. I can get ready a little earlier than anticipated, but happy to be moved up in the agenda.
I'll be on the lookout for Danny, but for now he's not here and it's just you, Howie.
Got it. Well, then give me just one moment to pull everything
Sure.
up and then we'll begin. I'll make this full screen, but can folks see it?
Yes.
All right, so I'll just jump in here and I'll just say up front that, I'm here I'm Howie Levine. I'm from MTA accessibility team. And, the new month has caught me as off guard as it maybe has caught everyone else. Apologize for that other presentation. But so I'm happy to speak about accessibility topics. And then for any off topic comments, hopefully Danny joins and he can take those. But for now, just accessibility topics, if that's all right.
Yes, that's what we're talking about today.
Perfect. And so I'll dive right in. So I'm going to update you on a few different pieces of accessibility work we are working on, and then talk primarily about the stroller pilot, as that's what is new and happening, particularly in CB8. So just to start off talking about our capital plan progress a little bit. So in case folks weren't aware, the MTA is committed to making 95% of our subway stations accessible by 2055. It's really the first time we've had a date around, that timeline and a timeline attached to this. We've been working towards it, but not with a particular timeline in mind. And so this is part of an agreement we reached earlier this summer between the MTA and advocates, and the photo of the press conference we had with this agreement below. And so in addition to 95% by 2055, there's a number of milestones to keep us on track. There are some contingencies, if funding things change. We're in the middle of some conversations around funding at the moment, but we hope to definitely be able to meet this 2055 deadline, and are excited that there's finally a timeline attached to it. And additionally, we're continuing to make subway stations, but we have 140 stations across every borough that are accessible right now. That includes more than elevators and ramps and vertical accessibility. So there's an ADA boarding area near the conductor, and you can see the signs here on the upper right, where the gaps between the platform and the car are, minimized compared to the rest of the platform. We also install tactile warning strips, you can see on the bottom right photo, as well as Braille signage, and making our station booths accessible as well. And so we do that at all of our accessible stations that are currently in the system. We're also, with that commitment in mind, we're still continuing our work on our capital plan, which is how we fund our projects every 5 years. So right now in the 20 to 24 capital plan. And even with COVID-related delays, we have 23 accessible station projects in construction, 13 more anticipated to start by the end of the year. And we continue, to seek all possible funding, but of course, continuing to seek funding in Albany and at other levels as well, to make sure we can stay on track with these capital plans, particularly through congestion pricing as well. So this is a list of all of the stations in Manhattan in construction. As I'm sure folks are aware, we have 68th Street Hunter College in CB8, and then others that you can see here recently completed and in our capital plan to be committed during this program as well, including 86th Street on the 4, 5, and 6, which is only partially accessible right now. So in addition to the capital work, we also have accessibility programs that we work on, stroller pilot included. So one of those is the AutoGate Access for All that folks might not be aware of, but at our accessible stations, we have AutoGates you can see here in the photo. And those are for folks that, cannot use the normal turnstiles. And previously it was you had to have a special Metro card to use the gate, but when you tap Omni or you dip your Metro card, that gate opens automatically, which is different than, the gates you might see at our non-accessible stations. And so you have to, there's the signage that you see here that indicates what is an auto gate and what is not. And so last year, when we installed the Omni validators, we made the change that any Omni device, any MTA Metro card can access the auto gate. We know folks, there's not just people with disabilities that need these gates, but the photo people with strollers, people with luggage, bikes, temporary, you're on crutches because you've injured yourself temporarily. So made it available to all customers and kind of expanding, what accessibility means. It's not just people with disabilities, but, and making our system more accessible really can help all of our customers at different times. Another big program update is that Omni is here for our reduced fare customers. Up until this point, it's only been for full fare, pay for every trip customers, but we've recently, just a week or so ago, opened this up to our reduced fare customers. So that's seniors and people with disabilities. And so with Omni, you get the accessibility of the contactless payment, which is very helpful for some folks. One less card, there's no preloading necessarily. You got to access the weekly fare capping, the Lucky 13 marketing that you may have seen. So your 13th tap is free, and after that, during any given week. And of course, use an Omni account that you can, more easily track your trips and your travel patterns. And so you make that switch right now to open loop with Omni. So using your own wallet, your own digital wallet or credit or debit card that's contactless. And you do that online through our 24/7 digital assistant, which is on our website. And we have a dedicated call center that can help walk you through that. But right now the switch is online and it's on our open loop, which means your own personal debit, credit card, or smart wallet or wearable device. And Omni reduced fare dedicated Omni cards will be coming in the future. And so lastly, our topic on the agenda is the bus open stroller pilot. And so as mentioned, that's particularly on the M31 and CB8. And so right now, the MTA policy is that caregivers boarding the bus with a stroller need to fold the stroller up before boarding, which creates a barrier to access and also can slow down the bus for everyone if they're not aware and they get on the bus and you have to fold the stroller and the bus driver wants to wait for them to do that process before they can take a seat safely. It can slow the trip for everyone. So this spring, the MTA formed a working group with disability advocates, parent advocates, and our bus operators to look for a new solution. We're now running this pilot on 1 to 2 routes in every borough where there's dedicated, parking space for one open stroller. And I'll add it separate from the priority seating area, which is also a wheelchair securement area in the front of the bus. And so you can see an example on the right, a picture of the designated stroller area here, and it's next to these folded flip up seats. And I'll get into that. So the goal here with the working group and this pilot was to keep as many seats as possible while creating the space to safely park a stroller. As I mentioned, no overlap between this area where you can see kind of in the middle of the bus and the priority seating area in the front of the bus. And the pilot includes 2 types of buses. So this is, an area that's across from the rear door that's created by flipping up these 2 seats. You can see that yellow knob on the seat to the left of the stroller. And that, you pull that to flip that seat up and out of the way. And this is primarily what you'll see on the M31 bus. On some of our other buses in the pilot, the area on the other side of the bus in front of the rear door is a designated stroller area created by removing 2 seats. And so there's a list of routes here, M31, the only one in Manhattan. And so all of the buses on each of these routes have been retrofitted to have the designated space. There's a decal on the outside of the bus near the front door that indicates it definitely has that space on the interior, but because these buses, are sometimes swapped out for maintenance that's unexpected or things like that. So it might not always have, you might not always have a bus with the stroller area, but we've made every effort to have these fleets kind of set aside and designated that, when you're getting on a bus on the M31 during this pilot, it should have this stroller space. And so we selected these routes due to higher ridership, dedicated bus fleets, as I mentioned, and geographic equity in mind across the city. And you can find more info, including a video, on our designated webpage as well. And so just talking about the M31 for a second, for those who are not familiar with it, runs from East 92nd Street, down York Avenue, Sutton Place, and then across 57th Street to 11th Avenue, as shown in this image here. Connects numerous bus, subway lines, and serves schools, playgrounds, cultural institutions, and particularly the hospitals on the Upper East Side as well. And so with that, I will take any questions.
Before we go to questions, on the M31, is there going to be 1 space? I know you said 1 to 2 spaces, but is it going to be basically 1 space?
Yeah, no, good question. So to clarify, there's space on one bus, there's space for 1 open stroller. And just the location of that space may change. There's 2 different places depending on the type of bus. Okay. That would change.
Okay, thanks. Are there any questions from the public here? Do we see any hands?
don't yet, but I'll just remind everybody, if you tuned in late, go to the participants or go to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and look for the raise hand button if you'd like it to participate, or you can chat if you're having problems finding it.
Okay, well, we have some board members, so why don't I call on them and we'll see if there's any members of the public that want to chime in. And Peter Borak had his hand up first, so can we have Peter?
Go ahead, Peter.
Unmute Peter.
Yeah, he has the option. Just
There you go. Thanks. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for this presentation. I think this was great, really helpful. It's great to see the MTA moving forward on this. I have a pretty specific question, and if you don't have an answer, that's okay. But with respect to the subway accessibility program, I know that there is a provision of the zoning resolution which actually permits in special transit districts developers to actually help make subway system stations accessible by building elevators or performing other work themselves. I understand that some developers aren't really actually comfortable doing work for the MTA themselves, but actually would be willing to make financial contributions to the MTA or to those projects specifically. And I'm curious if the MTA would be in favor of an amendment to the zoning resolution to permit real estate developers to, at the MTA's election, instead of actually performing accessibility enhancements, but to make a contribution towards such enhancements.
Got it. No, I can speak to that, Peter. So I think what you're referring to is the zoning for accessibility text amendment that was passed last October and includes
not exactly. I'm actually referring to the special transit use districts, which is a little different from ZFA.
Got it. I cannot speak so precisely to that, so I will defer that and have, we'll get that question to us.
Okay. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah, apologies.
Okay, Rebecca Lamort is next.
Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation and the updates. I have one point and a question. If you could just speak a little bit more to some of the funding concerns you mentioned. So often disabled New Yorkers like myself see the MTA not meet these accessibility goals because of funding, and you've already alluded to concerns about them, which is concerning for me if we have this milestone out there of 95% of stations by 2055. So if you could speak to that, and then I'll follow up with my next point.
Sure. Particularly on the capital side, building new elevators, new ramps at stations, making them newly accessible. That's all funded, as I mentioned, out of our capital budget, and that's funded through our capital plan. And a big piece of the funding for that is coming from our central business district tolling program, which has been slowly moving forward here after some delays from the federal government. And so we really need that funding to kind of make the capital plan whole and ensure we can continue moving forward with these projects. We continue to award them, as I mentioned, 23 this year already, which we're very happy with, but we want to keep moving at that pace and, if anything, increase that pace. But there is, uncertainty around the funding coming through from the central business district tolling program. And so that's a big piece of it. That unfortunately is something that could hold up progress there.
And that's that actually leads a really great segue to my next point, which is about the congestion pricing tolling that we're going to see go into effect. Not enough of the system is accessible as it is, and the implementation program that's on the table now just really fails to address the lived reality and needs of disabled New Yorkers. And the panels that have been put together by the MTA and other government entities specifically lacked disability input, and that's why it's important that going forward, I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more to if the MTA can add disabled feedback and panel a group specifically about this, because I agree that the funding is paramount to making these accessibility upgrades reality, but we're really putting the cart before the horse for this population of people in New York, over 1 million of us, that are continually disenfranchised from the system already. So what can we get on that front? How can we add disabled voices to the mix, because they're really lacking right now in a big way?
Sure. So I was able to hear most of your question. There's a little bit where you broke up in the middle, but in terms of making sure people with disabilities are heard in this process, I mean, I will say that generally People with disabilities are basically the only exemption, excuse me, that was in the state legislation that created the Central Business District Tolling Program. The exact details of that are, worked out by the Transit Mobility Review Board, which has been recently formed. But it's set aside in state law. There's no question that that will be an exemption to the congestion pricing fee when it is put into place. And so that, is a big way that this has kind of been, recognized as a priority from the very beginning of this program. In terms of, feedback and getting people from the disability community involved, continually taking feedback on this process from anyone. And, of course, there was a whole series of public hearings that occurred on this. And I know we heard from many, many people, I think, to put it lightly, but happy to continue taking feedback.
One final point, and then I'll move on because I see some other hands. And I do appreciate the feedback. However, it is disingenuous just to hear again from the MTA that there's an exemption in the law, because the exemption is simply a couple of words that says vehicles carrying passengers with disabilities will be exempt, but there's no additional notion about how that process will go about it, the kinds of disabilities, who will be deciding who's disabled, all of that. And that's not something that should be decided by able-bodied people on the mobility board that's been impaneled. They're mostly real estate representatives. So also other aspects of New York life are really missing from it too. So I would implore you to really dig deeper on this front. I submitted testimony, but I haven't heard back from the MTA. I'm a disabled New Yorker. I spoke about these issues in the hearing process you just outlined. Other people on the board did as well. So it's really paramount that the MTA dig deep on this one and not simply do the status quo and what we've seen in history, because it's concerning that we're just going to repeat bad behavior once again when we have an opportunity to build anew, to decrease congestion, improve our environment, and bring about widespread accessibility. And if that's the intent, I would hope that we're centering the people closest to the problem as a part of the solution, and that's disabled New Yorkers in this case. So really, really, really implore you and urge you to dig deep. I'm more than happy to meet with you, pull in others, however is helpful, but we really need to do a lot more and a lot better on this one, because that funding is paramount to accessibility. But I don't want myself, others in the disabled community, to be harmed in the process to get that funding. So one day down the line, everyone can take subways. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate the presentation tonight.
And Rebecca, I just want to follow up with that. And while we have Howie and MTA on the line, I just want to make reference to the fact that Community Board 8, through our congestion pricing task force last month, passed a resolution that spoke to a lot of the issues that Rebecca was discussing. There were 5 points to that resolution. The first one being that we request that the MTA impanel a council on mobility for individuals with disabilities to address challenges with using public transit and the impact of congestion pricing on individuals with disabilities. And we made some other policy recommendations as well in regards to how the MTA should approach this issue and work with this population. So I strongly urge you to please take a look at the resolution and please seriously consider the suggestions that we had as a community board.
Thank you.
Rita, I think Rita Poppers, I see Rita here. Rita, can we unmute Rita?
I think this is a great program and long overdue. I do have a question about maintenance. All too often, and I'm talking about the Q line, is that an escalator is out and it's out for a very long time. Do you have any plans to have maintenance as quickly as possible? I know those are words, but I'm talking about within a day, within 2 days of an outage. I am referring specifically to 72nd Street, where the escalator's been out for several weeks. Where you get to a landing at 70th Street on the Q line, and your only choice is one escalator or the stairs, and the escalator's down and you're handicapped. So you're disabled. So what are your plans for maintenance?
And I'd just like to add to that, 86th Street as well has been an issue. I think it was just last weekend where the elevator was out for repair. And I think that we all are all similarly frustrated at the fact that this is a brand new subway line and we have brand new stations and we regularly encounter escalators and elevators being out of service. And I think it's just really doesn't create a good perception that new infrastructure is failing at this rate so quickly. So if you can help us understand what can be done and what you're doing to try to rectify this.
Sure. So I can't speak to Second Avenue specifically. I can speak more to system-wide, and I'll certainly refer to the 86th Street and the 72nd Street back to Danny and make sure they're aware and they're working on that as quickly as possible. Generally, with any elevator, any escalator outage, we're working to make those repaired as quickly as possible. I can't speak to what is holding up the repair at 72nd Street longer than what it sounds like is usual. I know we have had some issues with supply chain and getting parts. I hope those are mostly resolved now. But that has been an issue that we've had over the last year or so, generally with elevators and escalators. And in terms of steps, to make sure that our systems are maintained well and continue to work properly. I mean, I'm going to say this, and I know from personal experience that basically our system averages that for every minute in the system, our elevators, I'll speak specifically to elevators since that's what I work with most, are available 96.5% of the time. And that, it's 24/7, and that includes the time when they're out for just preventative maintenance, which is just guaranteed to be about 2% of any given elevator's life. And so it's high, and we always want to make it better and improve and make our machines as reliable as possible. But when the elevator's out when you need it, and when it's out, at prime rush hour times, even if it's just out for an hour, it has a profound impact on your commute, has a profound impact on anyone who needs the elevator's commute, when an elevator's not working. So we continue to try and make these machines as reliable as possible. It's a little outside of my wheelhouse, but I know we've had some supply chain issues recently. But I will definitely take back the feedback on 72nd escalator and the 86th Street elevator.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to ask quickly, since I don't see any other hands up, do you have any more information you could provide on 86th Street and the 59th Street NR accessibility upgrades that I think you mentioned are funded in the current capital program, if I'm not mistaken? If you have any sense of timeframes and when we can expect some community engagement on that?
Yeah. So no timeline beyond it's, a commitment of ours in this capital plan. And so that, means we want to make sure that's awarded by the end of 2024. But I don't know exactly where they are in terms of, we generally are awarding these projects in packages. And I don't know where these two stations are. But I can certainly, as they are getting closer to, being put out for award, there's an RFP or anything like that, I think we'd certainly make the board aware.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have one more hand, Sandra Lerner, a member of the public. Can we unmute Sandra?
Sandra?
Yes, hi. I'd like to mention a bus shelter at a bus stop on 79th Street and First Avenue westbound. That bus stop was moved because of construction. The shelter was removed in March of 2022. It is now November of 2022, and the new bus shelter has not been replaced. And this is a community of many senior citizens, people with walkers, children, strollers, and we are standing in the rain and in bad weather conditions now for 9 months. I would like to know when the MTA will decide to put a bus shelter to replace the one that was removed in March.
Yeah, understood, Sandra. So I'm not familiar with this, and I will say in general that the movement of those bus shelters and the maintenance of them are handled by city DOT. Of course, they respond to when, our bus service moves as well. And so, it's mostly DOT, but we are a party to this as well. but I can take that back and see what I can find out. Although I would suggest the board also follow up with
Yeah.
DOT.
I believe that is associated with a construction project, so it's a temporary relocation of the bus stop. So I thought that MTA doesn't replace bus shelters at temporary bus stops if they are unable to be accommodated based on the stop location. And I thought that was the case in this instance.
That's
This
certainly-
bus stop is temporary for 3 years. So for 3 years, we're going to be without a bus shelter. I don't find that to be temporary, because that's how long the construction is going to take. And we have winter coming, we're going to have snow. We all know the weather conditions. So I will not accept the fact that it's temporary, because it's not until 2025 that that construction will be completed and the bus stop will be moved back.
So it's Colleen from DOT. Whenever we have a construction project and there's a bus stop in the area with the shelter that's in the way of the project, we do relocate the bus stop temporarily.
What about the shelter?
We
What about the
relocate.
shelter?
We don't install the shelters. No, we don't do that. We just store the bus stop. We install it at a different location, but we do not install the shelter back again until the construction is completed.
So you're saying for 3 years, there'll be no bus shelter,
That's correct.
and you find that to be acceptable?
Personally, I don't, but there is a reason why we don't do that, because the reason why we don't install the shelter is it's because of the width of the sidewalk, or there could be other impediments in the way preventing us from doing so.
At that location, there isn't? I would like it to be looked at.
I'm sure there are impediments in that area preventing us from installing the bus stop.
Look, that's not the real reason. They don't want to pay for a temporary bus shelter, and that they have to then put another bus shelter back in the original location. That's the reason, the major reason why they don't do it. And I think, unfortunately, we can talk to DOT, but I have a feeling that you can't get too far on this issue, unfortunately. Okay, thank you, Howie. We appreciate your presentation, and hopefully the
Thank you.
MTA will continue to make good progress on its accessibility stuff.
Thank you very much. And as folks, with strollers, without strollers, ride the M31 and, have any feedback, we'd love to get that and hear what people are experiencing on the bus. So I'll send a link
Sure.
to the district manager and hopefully share that feedback link as well. Thank you.
Okay, our next we want to hear from DOT about their car share program. And do we have people here from DOT who can present on this?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's Colleen Chattergood from City Department of Transportation. So I'm joined tonight by my colleague Stevie Fig and others who I'd like to introduce Stevie. Stevie will give a brief remark, and then we will give the presentation. So thank you.
Hi, how is everyone? I'm Stevie Feig from the Department of Transportation. So I'm just going to share my screen very quickly. One second. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to give a brief overview about car share and our 2-year pilot program. I'm also going to introduce our car share partners. We have Adrian and Rachel from Get Around and Sohail from Truck It. And once I finish with my little spiel, I will turn it over to them so they can go over their sites and their companies. So just a little background on car share. It provides on-demand short-term access to a shared fleet of vehicles. It's typically through a membership and you pay by the hour or the day. So DOT launched a car share pilot program in June of 2018. Zipcar and Enterprise were our partners in this program. The pilot had 230 on-street spaces, and we were within 3 different neighborhoods in Manhattan and 55 municipal parking facility spaces. Over this 2-year pilot, We averaged 24 trips per space per month, and we served an average of 17 households per available vehicle per month. The pilot saw greenhouse gas emissions and vehicles miles traveled decline 7% and 6% respectively. We did a very thorough evaluation of this pilot with UC Berkeley, and they gave 3 detailed customer surveys before, during, and after the pilot. And through that survey, they concluded that for every 1 car share vehicle, 4 personal vehicles were either not purchased or sold. So for Community Board 8, we have 8 requested sites total between both companies. Each site is 2 parking spaces, and they will be located on the same block face at the corner, like the picture on the left, bottom left, with regulatory signage. And I will turn it over to Adrian and Rachel from Get Around. Are they Adrian?
You should be able to unmute.
There we go. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I was on mute. I apologize for that, everyone. I'm Adrienne Retz. I manage government partnerships at Get Around, which means I get to work with communities across the country to bring shared transportation options. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Get Around and then some more details on how we hope to serve your community district. So Get Around is a round trip car share company. We provide affordable and accessible cars for people who need them to live and work. We were founded in 2009, and our goal really was to do something with the cars that sit idle 95% of the day, which sounds like a lot, but is true. Cars just sit around most of the day. And so our company wanted to do something about that. Now we're in almost 1,000 cities across the globe, mainly in the United States and Europe. About 350 of those cities are in the United States. And we've seen about 6 million trips since we started. Go ahead, Stevie. Get Around is quite different than a traditional rental car company, meaning that it's free to join. There's not a membership fee or a monthly recurring fee, and you can book your trips for as little as an hour. So you're really only paying for a car for what you need and when you need it. So this means car share and Get Around is perfect for picking up your groceries, going to a doctor's appointment, somewhere you can't reach on transit, a meeting. So how do you use it? You upload your driver's license to our mobile app or the website, and you can be ready to drive in just a few minutes. You don't have to wait for a membership card to come to you in the mail or anything. You do have to be at least 19 years of age, but we have users of all age that use Get Around. About 10% of our users are over the age of 55. We also install technology into all of our cars called the Get Around Connect. It's a device that connects to the starter, and it means that everything is contactless. So you don't have to meet up with someone to exchange keys. You don't have to wait in line at a counter. Everything is all contactless. Of course, our trips come with insurance and customer support. Go ahead, Stevie. Really, we have 3 main objectives at Get Around, and I will go over these quickly. But at the top, really to be an equitable mobility option. Then to reduce congestion, so hopefully help with some of the traffic concerns we have in the city, and then to be environmentally friendly. So just quickly going through each of these. At the top, we know from looking at our users, we have a large portion of people of color, people that are lower and middle income, and people that don't own their homes or who are renters. We also know when we're looking at when people use car share on the second line there, people who do have a car decide to sell it or donate it after they get access to car share, very similar to what Stevie mentioned in the results of the car share pilot. If people do not have a car, they decide, to still not buy one, which is what we like to see. And then if they do have a car, they use their personal car much, much less after they get access to car share. In the third line, our goal is to be environmentally friendly, of course. What we see is people not only are using shared cars, but they're also sharing the ride, meaning 3/4 of our trips, we see people sharing a ride with someone else. More than 2 people are in the car. We also know that car share reduces greenhouse gas emissions, And we see a significant amount of people that use GetAround that don't have a car at home at all. We know in your community district, about 75% of people don't own a car, which means on occasion you might need one, which is why we're excited to collaborate with the DOT to provide it, to help free up space at the curb and make less traffic. So what does this mean for you as community members in your community district? Go ahead, Stevie. When we were looking at locations for the DOT's car share program, we consider a few things. First, we want to co-locate our car share vehicles near other shared modes of transportation. We really want to be part of the transportation ecosystem, if you will. So city bike docks, ferry stops, subway stations, bus stops. We want to make it easy to take the bus to a car share and then finish your trip in a car share if you need to. We also want to use locations that are really visible. We know that a lot of people may not even know about car sharing. We see about 30% of people find out about car share as an option just by seeing the dedicated signs and decals on the vehicle on the street. And then, of course, that they're in safe, well-lit, well-traveled locations. So through the DOT's car share program, we've applied and have been approved for locations across all 5 boroughs. Go ahead, Stevie. And in your community district, DOT has preliminary approved 6 locations, meaning 12 vehicles, which are shown here on the map. I do know it's a little zoomed out, but what we were trying to do is make sure that these locations are spread across the community district so that, you know, more of the population can get around whenever they need to. Go ahead, Stevie. We can talk more about these locations if you'd like, of course. So in consultation with DOT, we have created an equity and outreach plan to make sure that we're making car share available to everyone, low-income people, working families, everyone who might need a car on occasion. So we're offering a variety of discounts. First, just a discount to let people know that car share is an option. Second, really partnering with community organizations. So let's consider a food pantry who might have volunteer drivers that deliver food, or a little league that needs to transport equipment. We're partnering with community organizations. And if you have recommendations for us, we would love to hear them. We're also providing a discount for underserved residents. So people who live in NYCHA residents or on public assistance, we're creating a program where they would get a recurring discount every month that they could use more than one time. We also want to share materials with community organizations, the city, your community district, of course, residences, about car sharing as an option with these discounts. And then we will be working with DOT to collect regular feedback to see if the locations are working, and then, you know, how we can add more locations or move them around and really just keep learning about the program. So let me pause there. I'll be able to answer questions about GetAround after the presentations, and then Stevie can answer questions about the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. And I'm now going to turn it over to Sohal from Truck It.
Hi, thank you, Stevie, for the intro. To the community board and the public at large in attendance, thank you for making the time for us. We appreciate it. So just a little bit about Truck It. We are a car share company that specializes only in pickup trucks, specifically smaller Toyota Tacomas. We were established in 2019. Since then, we've grown to 20 pickup trucks, currently operating entirely in the San Francisco area, but now hoping to expand to New York City as well. So over the last 3 years, we've become the go-to provider for daily and hourly truck rentals. We've obtained one of only 4 car share operator permits in San Francisco. We have over 300 trips per month. And we're seeing during peak hours, we're seeing our utilization get over 50%. So we're happy to see that, and we are providing a major service to the community through that. Next slide, please. So our goal is to really empower residents to do things that they didn't think were possible before we came along, such as completing home and garden renovations, eliminating clutter, moving a room share, or picking up items on Craigslist, or the time when you go to the big box retailer, end up buying a few too many things, getting them home, from the store. So in bringing that mission to life, we've, like I said, we have easy to drive, easy to park pickup trucks located in the neighborhood. And our slogan is go ahead, ask to borrow the truck, we don't mind. Anyone who's ever needed a pickup truck and had a friend with one, that can sometimes cause a lot of friction. So we like to be that friend. Next slide, please. So there are other ways to get pickup trucks currently. We looked at solutions provided by big box home improvement, the moving truck rental companies, traditional rent a car. We found that there was quite a few drawbacks there, which we aim to solve for. Big box home improvement, you're not able to reserve a truck. And oftentimes they're much bigger vehicles. They're the Ford F-250, 350, not really designed for urban use. They're oftentimes, even if you can make a reservation, their systems are not really designed to honor an exact hourly reservation. Oftentimes you have to go to the airport for a pickup or a bigger location, which is not necessarily in town. So if you need a truck for a couple hours, having to trek 30 minutes or an hour to get to the vehicle is not really ideal. So we offer trucks in the city, on street locations. The goal is you should be able to walk to a pickup truck, reserve it, unlock it with your app, and you're off and running. And we've seen that in San Francisco where people are able to reserve a truck and they're on their way in under 5 minutes in some cases. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here we're just touching upon our a little bit more about our solution. So it's mobile app based. You're able to search, book, rent in minutes. You unlock the vehicle from your phone. So, as mentioned earlier, there's no in-person key exchange. You're not waiting in line. You literally approach the truck and you're able to unlock it and go once you've been approved within the platform. And, so currently we've got in San Francisco, we've got 2/3 of our trucks on street, which is, a great way to get the word out. We're able to create quite a bit of awareness for car share through the on-street program. So we're excited about joining that program in New York City. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we've requested 2 sites for a total of 4 trucks in District 8. And the reason we selected these particular locations is their proximity to various hardware stores. It's near the 86th Street shopping district. It's close to some Goodwill location. And, as we've seen in San Francisco, these 2 locations have a good mix of residential and commercial. So that's where we see some of our highest utilization in San Francisco. So we thought, let's translate that over to the New York market. And then of course, learn from there based upon our utilization numbers and evolve into becoming more and more useful as time goes on. So that's us, and we're excited to deploy our vehicles out to District 8. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Stevie now.
Thank you. And these are the specific sites that are being requested. Questions and comments?
Let me clarify one second. We have 8 sites. And are the 2 trucket sites are the ones that we just heard about, and the rest are the get around sites rather?
Correct.
Okay.
And can you just clarify whether these are specific to the vehicle? So if you were to get it at one location, you have to bring it back to that same location?
Correct. It's round trip.
Okay.
Okay, let's see about questions first. We have some. The first question I see is a member of the public. It's Brandon Carley. Can we unmute Mr. Carley?
Yeah, hi. So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to put a couple of facts out there. So for starters, Get Around has a market capitalization of around $12 billion. That's billion, not million. And I just read the pitch deck for Get Around, and it's pretty clear that the #1 goal of the company is to make money. Now, I have no issue with that. I'm in business, but let's be honest, and let's not whitewash it. These are businesses, not community services. I would also add July 21, so a year ago, the Attorney General for the District of Columbia settled with GetAround, requiring GetAround to pay the district $1 million to pay restitution to users whose vehicles have been damaged or stolen. So these companies don't have completely clean records either. We're being asked to, or the city is asked to charge these companies, I think the number is $237 per year per spot for these. That's about 5% of what the average New Yorker pays to park their car in a garage. So it is a fraction of what the market rate is for a parking spot. These are well-funded companies. I'm not saying we should stick it to them, but they can clearly afford to pay market rates. And this is a subsidy and a giveaway of public resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to clarify. They are paying it's $475
For 2 spaces.
for 2 spaces.
Right. So that's
unfortunately, so let me just finish. Unfortunately, us as the city, we are bound by charging. We have to go through administrative costs. So there's no market rate for residential parking as of right now.
No, there's a market rate. The market rate is what all of us pay, or those of us who have cars pay for parking in the city. That's the definition of market rate, right? I understand that there's not a city mandated rate, but that is market rate.
Unfortunately, we don't have that as a city agency. We have to charge based off administrative costs, and that's where that price came from.
So just factually, this is a giveaway. Well, I understand the constraints, but this is a giveaway to at least one of these companies is a $12 billion company. This is a giveaway of public resource. Let's just be really clear about that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next to Sandra Lerner, member of the public.
Okay, yes. So I understand we're talking about 16 parking spaces. I am sure most of you from CB8 that are on this call were at the meeting when we heard from Hospital for Special Surgery and the concern of all of us about taking parking spaces away from people who will be visiting there for their medical reasons. And we were complaining that there will be less parking spaces in our neighborhood for our cars and the garages will be filled. Now you are asking us to take away 16 more parking spaces from this neighborhood. I am asking the board to really think hard about this, because this is more unfairness for those of us who have cars and have to find a place to park. And we all talked about this at the HSS meeting a couple of months ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Matthew Collins. Can we unmute Matthew?
Hi, thank you. I guess my one question, which I think was partially answered or tells me a little bit more about what the charge is the charge of 200 or 400, 237 or 475 a slot per year. I would be curious to know how this compares to the average revenue from similar parking places in the targeted neighborhoods. I guess that's kind of a DOT question. But ultimately, I have to agree with the earlier speaker, given that there are endless discussions about congestion pricing in New York, and indeed a discussion later on tonight's agenda about the abuse of parking placards. The provision of low-cost parking spaces seems like the wrong solution to the issue of pollution and congestion in New York City. The lowest polluting parking space is one that never has had a car in it. There already are places to rent cars and trucks in this city, and the incremental improvements claimed by the 2 presenters don't really seem to justify shifting the costs, the honest business costs of these businesses, shifting the costs of these marginal businesses to the city. So I would ask the board to really recommend that these proposals not be accepted, and potentially to go back to the DOT and, if they're going to do this, develop a realistic pricing model that is on par with the costs that other people in the city have to pay for parking, whether that's on street or private parking.
Okay, thank you. Sandy Marks, I believe, is next. Can we unmute Sandy?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. First off, I'd like to say, agreed, of course, with Brendan Carley's earlier statements, but luxury buildings on my block have taken 2 spots this year, just on my block. I'm on 85th Street, for Amazon deliveries. Schools have taken lots of spots for 7 to 4, no parking during the day. City Bike, a privately held $1 billion company, and their biking business alone is a $1 billion company, took, as we know, tons of spots. More spots have gone to meters. Obviously, this can't continue. I've tried Enterprise Car Share, Zip, Revel. These companies all put their cars in garages. That is a perfectly acceptable solution. Put the cars in a garage, pay for the spot. In addition, I'd love to see the metrics on the UC Berkeley study. How they calculated that it would reduce greenhouse gases is skeptical to me. I'd love to see the study. Finally, those companies, when you need a car, they charge surge pricing and they're very expensive, and you generally can't get a car on a holiday weekend. So this is generally just a tax to 16 people or 24 people, however many spots you give away, to low and middle income people that need the car for their job, for their life. This is a tax for those people that they'll have to put it into a $700 garage. And really that's who this is attacking. So I don't see how this can be approved. And personally, if it is approved, I'm going to continue to fight it.
Okay. Has there been any discussion I'll ask Stevie or maybe the companies about having these cars operate out of garages? Because you said you did with Enterprise and Zipcar, and I assume they operated out of garages because they do anyway now.
Stevie, I can speak to Get Around, if that's okay. Well, maybe I'll just say from Get Around's perspective, yeah, we absolutely do work with private garages and other real estate entities across cities everywhere we operate. The challenge we have, especially in Manhattan, though, is we've been priced out of those locations. Private garages won't even allow car share companies for the spaces. So our goal and part of the DOT criteria was to make sure we weren't interfering with private garages. So we can't pass that cost on to consumers, of course. And so that's why we're interested in the on-street spaces, to make sure we're serving as much of the community as we can in the district. So yeah, we do partner with private and retail. The challenge is, retail considers parking real estate, and so charged by the square foot. And then with private garages, there's just been an increase in demand since the pandemic. And so some garages have not considered car share to park in those locations.
Okay. Maggie.
Yeah, and,
no,
if
I'm
I
sorry.
may,
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, if I may reiterate some of that. Yeah, so I mean, in San Francisco, we've got 2/3 of our vehicles are on street and 1/3 are in city-owned garages. And we see across the board, we see higher ratings for our on-street park vehicles for various reasons. And keep in mind that the off-street locations that we have there are self-park. So even considering that, I mean, people find the vehicles harder to find. And sometimes there's low cell or cell coverage, so it's harder to the GPS signal is not as strong, and in a lot of cases the cell signal is not as strong, so it's just not as good of a user experience. And then if you translate that to New York City, most of the garages that that we've seen in and around where we've requested spaces, some of them, well, most of them are valet only garages. So if you think about a truck that you might need for 2 hours, if it takes 15 or 20 minutes to pull it out from the back, I mean, that's not an ideal use case. And then a lot of these garages are not 24 hours. So, we like to make our vehicles available 24/7 for all the various types of guests that we hope to have using our vehicles. So, and then also the on-street program, it provides a lot more awareness to car share, so it gets the word out. So, we definitely understand that it's a hardship, but we hope that the service that we provide will more than make up for that.
Okay, thank you. Next, Maggie Lehman from the public. Can we unmute Maggie?
thank you for allowing me to speak. This is Maggie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I would also put my voice alongside the others who are objecting to this program and would request CB8 to voice its objection both with the DOT and any other city agency that is weighing in on this. What I've read is that this is an expansion of a pilot program. By definition, as a pilot program, this should not be an ipso facto done deal. And I think that the presentators who have described this program by comparing New York City to San Francisco, it seems to me that that's either a disingenuous comparison or it's a comparison which suggests to me, anyway, in my opinion, that they haven't done their homework. The density of New York City, the density of the very neighborhood where these corners are being considered, the reference to the 86th Street shopping center suggests an ignorance of how crowded and dense it is. To take away these corners from private citizens' use, not only, as prior speakers have said, add to the already removed already removed parking spaces that we have due to, for example, the Excel construction of the hospital for special surgery on 79th and 1st, 80th and 1st. But in addition, the glut of block after block of construction that is ongoing on the Upper East Side, including on almost every single one of those blocks that this company is referencing. The construction that is there, the lanes that have been cut off, the parking that has been removed from construction also adds to the hardship. Last, and the failure to compare apples to apples here. San Francisco compared to New York City is not an apples to apples comparison. Lastly, but perhaps most important, to also use, I think that the presenter said, two of the corners, two of the spots for trucks seems to me to be nothing short of terrifying. Who is going to be granted the ability to drive trucks? Do you need a clean driving record? Do you need not to be 18 or 19 years old? Is there a special license for trucks? How big are the trucks? The notion that anyone, by simply getting on your platform, can go and rent a truck for 2 hours, not having learned how to drive a truck, not understanding the difference between driving a car and a truck, seems to me to be the epitome of recklessness. I would strongly request that our Community Board 8, which has fought so hard for this, for all our concerns year after year after year, really weigh in heavily that this has to be rethought. Thanks for hearing me out on this.
Okay, thank you. Dylan Geronimo Kennedy, I believe, is next.
Hi, thank you for calling on me, and thank you to those who presented. I just wanted a quick clarification point about the number of spots before I speak. My understanding was that it would be 6 for Get Around and 2 for Truck It. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I heard some larger numbers and just wanted to make sure.
Two spaces at each of the 6 locations.
Right. Right.
And
okay. Got it.
So we're talking
so
16 spaces.
Each of the 8 locations.
Oh yes, 6
Got
for
it. Okay.
Get Around, 2 for Truck It.
Okay. And then a point I just wanted to make is that I think a lot of people have spoken with concerns about parking. I will say I am someone who is calling in and who does not own a car in the neighborhood. And there's a charge thrown out, which is that this is taking spaces from private citizens, and so that they can no longer use them. I would also consider myself a private citizen. And just as others have purchased cars from, corporate entities, I might be interested in purchasing it from a place like this. So, I do think this is still something that is not a charity, as someone else made the point, but it does serve a public service to people in the neighborhood, as mentioned, 75% who do not own cars. And to the earlier points about various things removing parking, I think some of those are definitely frustrating, temporary construction, things like that. But I would point that some other times that we remove parking, we pull more people out of cars. So City Bike, I'm able to get in a lot of places because of City Bike. I don't have a car. I am never going to use up a parking space, and the city dock near me takes up at most 2 spots. If it is indeed true that the get around ones are removing more cars from the area than they are taking up on their own, then that seems like a worthwhile measure. I know there were studies talked about. I have not seen the studies. I cannot speak to them. I do think that's a fair metric to hold this to, because that seems to be the biggest concern, is the amount of parking. And if this can actually help congestion by making more people to take the choice I did and not have a car, then that will be a net positive. On the truck point, though, I do think of those a little differently. It seems much less likely to me that would cause someone to not have a car. The needs for that seem much more rare. I think a lot of times you would be well served just transporting something in a normal car. And on the rare occasions where you do need something larger, I imagine going a little out of the way for a U-Haul, I've done that sometimes, is not the end of the world. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I don't know how frequently there are issues where people need something too large for a car that they would need a pickup truck. And I agree. I think it was Maggie who's had some concerns about anyone driving a truck. I do believe they said specifically pickup trucks, which my understanding of current laws is that anyone can drive that. And, so maybe that's a separate question, but does mean more large vehicles are going to be in the neighborhood. And that can be a little bit dangerous for pedestrians. I realize it would only be 4, but I do think it makes sense to think of these 2 services in different lights because of one, I believe's greater ability to alleviate parking congestion by getting people to not own cars, and the other one potentially having greater risks, being that they are operating larger vehicles. So thank you very much, and I hope you can find that input useful.
Okay, thank you. Next is Stephanie Reckler. Can we unmute Stephanie?
Yes, I might have missed this, but what are the charges to the driver for this?
There wasn't much talk about the range of charges. Why don't someone want to comment on that from either the get around or truck it or
Yep, I can speak to that from Get Around's perspective. So the cost does vary on the type of vehicle. Get Around typically deploys small 4-door sedans. So think of Honda Civics, Toyota Corollas, that sort of vehicle. We also have requirements, just a little bit as an aside, to make sure they're efficient vehicles and newer models. But rates typically stay under $10 an hour. Again, we don't have a membership fee, so you're not paying an annual fee to be able to use the service on top of that.
So it would be 10. So if you rented it for 5 hours, it'd be like $50, maybe something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a mileage component to it, or is it just a flat fee? Or mileage limits?
Sorry, I muted myself there. 200 miles is included with a trip a day.
And who is responsible for filling up the tank?
That's on the individual. This is Adrian at Get Around again. That's on the individual user, because we don't charge a membership fee. We don't include gas to make sure, you're only paying for what you drive. So if you are using the vehicle, you are responsible for replacing the fuel that you use.
Okay, but gotcha. Okay. I think next is Boaz Galil. Boaz, can we unmute Boaz?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, lots of great points. I don't have a car, so I would actually sound like I would be interested in using those services. My question is, I couldn't find this information, maybe Chuck or Craig, you could answer. Is this correct that in Community Board 8, majority of the residents don't own a car? Is this a correct statement? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So, can you give me the numbers? It's like 80% that don't have car, and
Go ahead. Steve, did you want to say there was? I saw some figure about 75%. I don't know if that's Community Board 8 or.
I mentioned that, Adrian, at Get Around here, we just pulled census data, the most recent census. So it's about 210,000 residents in Community District 8. About 75% have zero car, and then another 25%, I have the exact number, 24% have one car in the household. So it's 97% have either zero or one car in Community District 8. That's from US Census data.
Okay, so it's
I was just going to say that's based off of households, and I don't believe it's 97%. I think that it was more like that 70-75% number, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, let's assume that 70% still majority. When I get a 70 in a test, I open the champagne. So 70% of the residents of Upper East Side don't have a car. Community board first thing need to focus on the majority of the resident. So I think that they should consider approving this program. Having said that, all the people that mention about the price of the parking are absolutely correct. Parking is not a free resource. I mean, we think it's a free resource, but it's not. I mean, if all the 75% people will buy cars and will try to find parking in Upper East Side, we'll find it very difficult. Even today, when I just came to Upper East Side 12 years ago, I had a car. I never found a parking. I always got a ticket. It's not. I think that regardless, the Community Board 8 need to ask whoever is in charge to figure out what is the price of the parking. And I guess it should be like a dynamic pricing, like during the peak hours, there should be a certain price. During the weekend should be a different price, and so on. But in the consideration of Community Board, I hope that they will look at the 75%, the majority of the residents who don't have car, and now at least they have some additional options. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian Verona, he was next. Brian, can we unmute Brian?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I won't mention the obvious subsidy and the cost, the incremental cost to other people who have cars in the city in terms of losing additional garage space. But I will ask the question to both. Why not electric cars? Why not go zero emissions? Obviously, it's important to me as a resident of Community Board 8 to have as little emissions as possible. I know it's a slight cost or burden, but obviously that's something that's important to the city and us as residents. So I'd like you both to comment on it.
So I can actually answer that from the DOT. At the moment, the infrastructure is not there citywide on the streets to have a fully electric car share program. The city as a whole is moving towards that way. We have a few pilot areas in the Bronx for EV chargers on street. Just right now, as a whole, we're not there infrastructure wise. As we continue to grow this program, we will be looking towards adding some chargers on street and incorporating electric vehicles into the program.
Okay. Let's see, Andrew Fine, who hasn't spoken before. We're going to unmute Andrew.
Hi, folks. Not sure if you can hear me.
We hear you.
Terrific. Chuck, I sent in testimony earlier today.
Yep.
And I'd like to cede my time to myself if somebody can please read the testimony I sent in. Thank you. I'm at a Knicks game with my kid, and it's her first Knicks game ever. So we'd love to enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll get it in the record. Let's see. Someone from a phone here, the 914. Who is that? Is that, I don't.
It's me, Evelyn David.
Okay, Evelyn, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. You know, if congestion pricing, I'm not going to go completely negative, but if congestion pricing is allowed to be created and comes on board, the idea of a parking space will be gold. So the idea, I mean, even though this is a really cool idea, what they're proposing, it's fabulous, actually. It's wonderful. And just putting them on places, corners near subway stops and buses, by the way, you're still taking away spaces from parkers, okay? Anything that takes away parking spaces with congestion pricing hanging over our heads like this sort of Damocles is insanity. It's insane. It's just insane. It's just too bad. It's too bad she's coming in at this point in time in the history of New York. All right? It's just too bad. I mean, we keep thinking about congestion pricing in terms of the recession, and adding $475 in costs to people coming to go to work every month, that's crazy. They won't come to work, or they won't come into the zone. The DOT, I mean, the MTA is not going to hit their $1 billion mark. Anyway, without going into that, I'm just saying, think very, very carefully about how you're going to say yes to this. Pilot programs are put out there and then they become permanent, and then you keep expanding them. There's no, it's like the bike shares, the bikes. They're now, okay, they're everywhere. That's great for people who bike. That's terrific. It's fabulous. It is wonderful. However. So it's just made it like more and more and more difficult and impossible to live here. And I don't know, I keep hanging in here, but you know, it's really, 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 really hard. And looking into the future, anyway, please think about this really carefully. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Yeah.
And I just want to clarify, this is a permanent program. Our pilot program unofficially ended this summer, and we've still been coasting through it, but this is a permanent program now, which is why we're expanding citywide.
Okay. Clarify that. Carol Silverman, next. Carol?
Hi. I've actually never been to one of these meetings before, so it's really interesting.
Well, welcome.
Hi. I just wanted to, as a community resident, add my voice to the opposition for all of the many good reasons that all of the other participants have mentioned. I just agree with all of them, especially on the trucks. A pickup truck in New York City should be considered a commercial vehicle and should not be taking residential parking.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you so much.
Let's go to the board now, and I'll take because the public has spoken once. There's someone I think who wants to speak again, but we'll wait on that. Michelle Birnbaum. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm just flabbergasted. Also, because it's already a permanent program and we are hearing it tonight so that everybody can say that they had a public hearing on it. But in fact, this is not going to have any impact on anything because the program is already underway. So that represents my continued disappointment with the process of the DOT. They never come to us in advance. It's always afterwards. And like with the plazas, they were supposed to be pilot programs all over Broadway, whatever. They became permanent, and you couldn't even get the paperwork that verified the outcome of the study. Having said that, with reference to San Francisco, we shouldn't be doing anything that emulates anything that's going on in San Francisco, even though they may well need pickup trucks because everybody's leaving. Having said that, gratuitous remark, as I recognize it is, this is just another way of selling the street. And I read Andrew's testimony, and my ideas parallel his and his mine. So I know you have it you're going to read it, you're going to have it in the record, so I don't have to go over it point by point, just to make the note that he is representing the 86th Street Association, which means that there are many more people in opposition here than just he as a representative and their chair, Elaine. This is a giveaway to private enterprise. This car sharing program started years ago with them renting garage spaces. And by the admission of the representative here today, the only reason it's moved out of the garage is because it's way too costly. So their solution is to take the free or relatively free, when you're talking about a couple of $100 a year that they're paying the city, their solution is let's take free spots from the public and make those the public go into the garage for $700 a month. That to me is not a solution. And like it or not, people have cars. You can call it 70%, 50%, whatever you want to call it. We are free citizens. We have the right to have a car. It is not a shun and a blight and a shaming. We're not going to have rocks thrown at us because we have cars. There are people who need cars and have them. There are people who just want cars and have them. And that's a perfectly acceptable point of view. But this is a giveaway to commercial enterprises on the backs of citizens who are paying their taxes, and their taxes include the use of the streets. So as you take away, and have less space for the residents and the businesses who function here on a daily basis, you are doing a disservice. And I maintain still that the safest car driver is a car owner. When you own a car, you are familiar with that car. When you get into the car, you are familiar with the brakes, you know the start and stops, you know the size of the car, you know what spaces you can whittle through on a small street. You are a safer driver with your own insurance with your car. Here, you will have strangers, like with any rental car, getting into a car, but not for a day or two, but for an hour or two, having to deal with the feel of the brakes, the feel of the gas pedal, how big it is, how it can wind through the streets. It's not safe. And there's no reason, I don't believe the stats that it diminishes car usage. Car ownership, maybe. Car usage, no. Everybody in this city uses cars. They use the Uber. Otherwise, these wouldn't be big business. And otherwise, these people wouldn't be coming to us for street landscape, for street property. It's because people use cars. But I would tell you, if I needed a car for a day and had to rent it, I wouldn't rent it from these people who would charge me $50 for 5 hours, where I can get a complete day rental for that amount. So this
I'd like to see in New York City where you can get that.
Well, I'll try to find that for you, Chuck. As you can realize, I don't have that with me at the moment, but I can tell you it's true. And 5,000
I rent cars all the time, and it's not even close.
So do I. 5,000 cars come over those bridges every single weekend and come into garages of which those car rental places own for rental over the weekend. And then 5,000 cars leave those car rental places at the end of the weekend. So those cars come and go into the city with need. These cars will be here forever. Also, let me note, I noticed that there's nothing in the 60s. So we can assume that there's no transportation hub or need in the 60s. You've got people getting off the tram. You've got the hospital corridor. How come there's none there? Not that I'm advocating for that. I am just noting that oversight. And the fact that there be a pickup truck for you to take your wares, where if it rains, your wares get wet. And pickup trucks now parked on our streets when we're concerned about oversized vehicles and pollution and all that business. This is a terrible program. It is a giveaway. If these people want to have this, let them rent garage space and keep their cars inside and not take spots from the public and then make the public have to pay for what they're getting for nothing. This is
All
the
right,
same
thank
kind
you.
of, I'll be finished in a minute. This is the same kind of giveaway that the city did when they tried to sell lampposts and sell the space for banners from private galleries and collect money by putting them up and down the meridians and on the flagpoles all over the city. Stop selling our sidewalks. Leave it for our citizens, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Crickler is next. Paul?
Thank you, Chuck. I understand why people who have cars and park them get so upset about this. Until 4 years ago, I owned a car, and it was great when the kids were younger. We used it a lot. But when we started using it less, it's also a miserable experience. It cost us $500 or $600 to park it. When something happened, it's never cheap. Then the gas is going up and the insurance. It's a very expensive thing to have. For some people, the equation's worth it. And also for some people who have a true need for a car. I think someone made the point before about those who have a need versus a want. This could be very good for people who really need to have a car, and also for people who are the marginal users who care about the car enough to want to put up with what all this is, the horrible part of owning a car. And there's probably 10 or 20% of people who currently own cars who over the course of 2, 3, 4 years, with more of these coming in, would happily give up the burden of owning a car because they hardly use it, but want to have the ability to do it. I'm one of those people who'd love to do it. Actually, from the other side, I gave up my car. This could be very good for people who either really want to have it or really need to have a car. But then you get to the second point, which is the point that Dylan made earlier, which I thought was brilliant. A lot of people on this call are making the point about taking space away from me. You see, I also pay taxes. And my taxes presumably also are the same taxes that pay for my use of the street space. And 75% of the street space is taken up by people who own cars by choice and want to park them there for free and drive their cars around the city. Nothing wrong with them doing that, but what about my rights? I would like to have some small share of that. I'd like to have my fair share of that. There's a list of things I could give you that could go on all night. But this is a teeny part of what I'd like to have. I'd like to be able to use the street space in a better way. One small part of that is I could be able to get a car once or twice a month when there's a painful trip to get to on the train, or it's just something I want to go and do and I want to use a car for, but I'm not going to own a car for that. I'd like that in return for my taxes. Thank you very much. I vote strongly in favor of this.
Billy Freeland is next. Billy?
Good evening, everybody. I want to start off with a few questions and then my thoughts. I heard in the testimony earlier that garages are not allowing car share companies to use their garage spaces. Is that true? Maybe that's a question for DOT. Maybe that's a question for the companies.
I made that comment, get around. I can just make a statement about our experience and then DOT can comment on the program itself because there are garages as part of the permanent program, but I'll let Stevie speak to that. In our experience, private garages have been not as allowing of car share vehicles as they have in the past, especially in Manhattan. There's just been a higher demand for parking space since the pandemic. And so the spaces are extremely expensive, as we've all discussed, or they're not interested in leasing spaces to car share companies because they can make more money with other companies.
Well, I don't know if Colleen, if you wanted to jump in on that. I guess I have two thoughts. One is, if they're actively saying, we don't want to rent out or lease out to car share companies, I wonder if the city needs some sort of law to say that's unacceptable. And I am a lawyer, but I'm not going to play one on this Zoom meeting, so I won't comment further on that. But the other thing I guess I wonder is, if a parking spot monthly is, and I guess this will show how out of touch I am as not being a car owner, it's called $500 a month. Michelle can correct me, higher, she says. You theoretically amortize that, you spread that over the cost of, many users, every day. If it costs, I was just on your website, looked at a car I could get for $152.96, which actually seems like a pretty good deal. If you can do that times 30 days a month or whatever, maybe that's worth the cost of doing business if it's, several $100s to have the garage space. So I'm not completely convinced by that. I don't know, Colleen or anyone has thoughts on whether this garage is not allowing car share programs, if that's been something you've considered, if you've spoken with the garages, if there are legal issues you can comment about.
Or maybe it's not, or maybe Stevie can comment on
Yeah,
that.
so I don't think DOT has any right over private garages, who they lease to and what they charge. That was something that I would have to check with our legal team on, but I don't believe we have any say on what private entities do and what they charge and who they let into their space.
Stevie, it's Colleen. That's correct. We do not, work with private garages in terms of their rates. So that would be a whole separate thing.
Yeah, certainly I agree on the rates. I guess I just would be more curious about this idea of saying, oh, you're a car share company, we're not going to allow you to put your car in our garage. I guess I'd want to better understand that, but we don't have to linger too much on that point. Another question is, are any of these parking spots on a corner? And I ask it because as a policy matter, I think some of us want to encourage more of what's called daylighting, which is leaving those corner intersection parking spots open so that there's greater visibility of pedestrians on the street. So are any of these spots right at the intersection corner?
All these spots are at the intersection. That's part of the siting criteria. I will say that I understand the daylighting issue, and we will be getting monthly data from these car share companies on usage, unique users. We will understand how long the trips last, kind of average trip length. And if we see that these spaces are not being used as intended, there's not a high utilization rate, we will remove these spaces. We're not going to keep these cars in spaces if they're not being used, if they're just sitting there. If there is a space near where you live, work, and you see there is a safety issue, that's what we want to know, whether you reach out to Colleen, 311, directly to me. So we're going to be monitoring these spaces very closely. We want to understand if they're being used, not being used, any safety issues. And with that, either the spaces will stay or we will remove them.
And I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't catch you at the very beginning. They are not at the corners?
Oh, they are.
They are at the corners, yes.
They are at the corner. Billy,
Okay.
what I understand Stevie was saying, they're at the corner. They want to see how they're used. If they're vacant most of the time, then it's not, it's not as much of an issue. But if they're staying there for a long period of time, then they're going to look at trying to move them because they don't want to have people blocking those areas for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how I feel about that because on the one hand, if they are vacant for a while, you achieve your daylighting goals. On the other hand, the periods where they're not vacant, you undermine your daylighting goals. So I guess I'd love for us to kind of be in contact on how that's working. Don't know in this moment how I feel about that. I guess, I'll just say a couple things. One is, I'm very sympathetic to these types of car share programs. I occasionally, when I need to go out of town, I'll use this company called Turo, which I don't know how similar that is, but you rent a car from someone who happens to own a car and you pick it up right on the street, and it's very convenient and it saves you some money. And I think it's good for encouraging a city where you don't need to own a car. On the other hand, I'm a bit concerned about subsidizing public space, which I'll just say we, in a sense, subsidize already by when it's free parking in particular, and having lots of parking, which is not the history of the city, by the way. We didn't always have, say, overnight parking in New York City. So I'm kind of conflicted on that front, but generally inclined to support expansion of car share. This seems relatively minimal, 6 locations, 2 spaces each. Where I think I'm adamantly opposed is the idea of supporting Truck It, with all due respect. I don't think pickup trucks and SUVs are good for a city. We know they've had a large role in rising traffic violence. Pickup trucks and SUVs are more deadly on our streets. And I am particularly concerned, and this goes to something Michelle was saying, about having those types of vehicles being used by people who may not be aware of how to drive those cars appropriately. So I have real reservations and could not right now support Truck It. I'm sure you all mean well, and I'm sure there is a need in Manhattan, especially. I don't feel there is such a need. To the extent there is one, we do have rental car companies around. There are ways to get a truck of that size if you truly need one. but I do not support devoting more of our street space to excessive cars that are doing a lot of harm and violence on our streets. I said that again respectfully. So I would, to the extent you need a resolution, what I'd love for us to discuss as a board is something reasonable on the car share generally, but absolutely against the expansion of pickup truck rentals on our streets. I just don't think it is appropriate. So thank you.
Thanks, Billy. Next, Sharon Poe Marshall. Sharon.
Sharon, you can go ahead and unmute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chuck. I have a question and a comment. I'd like to send 75%, and I've heard this figure for quite a number of years. I'm sure it's true, so I don't disagree with it. Since 75% of Community Board 8 residents don't own cars, I'd like to know what percentage of residences have driver's licenses.
That's a number we can look up for you. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can look that up.
And I do apologize. Who's speaking?
Stevie from the Department of Transportation.
That was Stevie from, yeah. That was Stevie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you. I think it's very important actually to have that information, particularly in light of the fact that 75% of our district does not own cars, which could possibly suggest that there would be a broader range of you know what, I'm not 100% clear who is going to be renting these cars in the first place. I suspect that not many residents in Community Board 8 have driver's licenses.
I think you'd be very wrong there.
Is that true? Okay. Okay.
You know, I'll tell you why I say that, Sharon.
I'll take your word for it. And listen, I'm an example. I own a car and I own a bike, so I definitely have a driver's license. But I thank you very much, Chuck.
No, because I do rent cars, and every time I go into the car rental place, they're booked solid. And all those people have driver's licenses because you can't rent a car without a driver's license.
Right. And my quick comment is, I was listening to the presentation and I said to myself, you know what? I think I'm going to get my nephews to rent one of those trucks, pick up this sofa that I've been looking at and tell them to bring it here. And that might make up for all the times that my sisters say, hey, can you babysit for me? I completely agree with Paul that this can be a service, and I say that in quotes, a service. But on the other hand, and it's a quandary for me, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this. I completely agree with Michelle. It is forcing people to pay for indoor parking, to pay for garage parking. And so Billy, you're to be forgiven for not knowing, but I can tell you it's around $700 or more a month, easily. So I'm not sure how I'm going to vote, and I'm hoping that what is the timeline on this, Chuck, in terms of, do we have to vote this evening?
Not necessarily. It depends on the committee. But as we heard before from Stevie on this, the program is going into effect. I mean, if we want to express ourselves on it, we might have to do it pretty quickly.
Okay. One last question from Stevie. You know what? I'm a little bit surprised, I guess, about this in terms of the amount of money that the companies have to pay. I think you said like $400 or something like that a month for a parking spot, and it's not possible for companies to pay more because it's limited to administrative fees. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's $475 per site annually. Unfortunately, as a city, we don't have the option to charge more. We have to charge based off administrative cost. I don't quote
And
me on
why
this. I
is
believe
it, I'm sorry to interject. Why is it the city's hands are tied with respect to this? With respect to its ability, with respect to its ability to charge more?
Colleen can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's a legislative law, and a legislative law would have to be changed for us to charge more. It's out of our hands.
City or state?
City.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Rebecca Dangor is next. So Rebecca.
Hi, I'm not going to talk too much about points that were already addressed. I have a couple questions and then maybe some ideas. The first is, I read in an article that the companies selected the neighborhoods, and I want to know the extent to which they selected these spaces. Did we post flyers on every single one of these sites that we're going to be taking parking from? Because to me, I'm uncomfortable with a private company picking the sites without speaking to the merits of car sharing services. I think it's strange that they would have jurisdiction over where in the city we would include parking. So I'd love an answer on that first, and then I have a couple other points.
Sure, I'll give a brief answer and then I can let Adrian and Sohail answer a little more specifically. For the department set forth citing criteria for the car share companies to adhere to, and part of the permanent program was expanding citywide. So we did allow the car share companies to choose where they would want to site their locations. We also asked them to do outreach, include equity plans, and have specific reasons for why they chose those specific sites for questions just like this. So I will open it up to Adrian and Sohail.
Yeah, Adrian here from Get Around. So after the DOT criteria that was set forth, we looked at all of that criteria that DOT had. And then, as I mentioned earlier, looked at spaces that are near other modes of transportation, that are visible, that are well-traveled, safely well-lit, well-traveled, as I mentioned. So for each of the locations, I can speak to exactly why we chose them, if helpful, for the 6 locations of Get Around. But generally, they're areas of high foot traffic, walking distance to subway, walking distance to city bike, within a few blocks of multiple transportation. So those are the main criteria we use, that they're co-located near other modes of transportation, they're visible, and that they're presumed safe, well-lit, well-traveled.
I want to re-echo Michelle's point that it's very strange that there's nothing in the 60s.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. And then DOT can speak more to the permit cycle, but each year, I'm not sure of the dates, DOT can speak to that there will be another permit cycle where we can request additional spaces, companies can, that qualify. So that's really good feedback. If you're seeing a gap there, we certainly want to make sure we're covering the city.
And then did we post at all these sites?
We did not. I don't know if DOT did. We only ask applicants who, we just got this letter from DOT. We did not get a request from either of these companies. So if I'd known that there were 2 companies associated with it, probably would have made them. But usually we do not ask agencies to flyer for us.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's not the board office's fault at all, but I just feel it's very strange that we wouldn't alert the people most immediately affected, right, potentially by losing these parking spaces. And maybe, I know this is a time-sensitive issue, but I'm a little concerned about that. And then the last point is, or 2 last points. One, I completely agree with Billy and Michelle. I think anything we do needs to express our disapproval regarding trucks. And finally, it's clear that the reason we can't charge more is a simple legislative issue. If we had wanted to make this a permanent program, and there is support for the use of it, I don't see why we can't craft a resolution or asking for legislative change to increase the cost, because it's laughable to me that they're only going to be paying like $400 a year. It's laughable. And that's not a comment on the merits of it in the first place. It's just, that is a simple solution that I think we have to do something about. Thanks.
So I hear you on the price. It is certainly a process to change legislative law. I believe there's, again, so quote me on this, I believe there's talks at the higher level of DOT to do that. It is a process. It's not something that happens overnight. So I just want to put that out there. Unfortunately, we are bound by legislative law, and it's something that is being talked about within the department. But it certainly is a process to get that much.
Whether or not they listen, we still have the option to add our concerns to what I guess your department is already thinking about. And I think that's something we have to walk away here tonight having done.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. Alice Lustig, member of the public, will call on Alice.
Yeah, hi. Some of my concern, well, I really appreciate what Michelle Birnbaum said, and I agree 100% with all that. But a couple of the other things is that I do not understand why the company will not use a garage, right? A garage is $800 a month versus $476 a year. That's only $4,800 a year in difference between a garage and the street. If the company has to be subsidized to the tune of $4,800 per car, that's not a business. I don't understand, and I don't think that we should be giving up our valuable parking spaces for anything less than ticketing revenue that's lost, or meter income that's lost, or at least, at a bare minimum, what average New York citizens have to pay for a garage space. So I find that a huge slap in the face. And if administratively that's a problem, then wait until it's administratively okay to charge a market rate. And in the meantime, park in the garage like all the rest of us schleps do. And, just pay up out the nose, because if you can't pay for the cost of doing business, then you don't have a business. And the other thing that concerns me is the trucks. The whole idea that somebody would need a truck in Manhattan on the spur of the moment to get home from Costco, where there's tons of drivers that are waiting to take people. There's professional drivers that are waiting outside Costco to take you home. And certainly nobody I know is moving on a spur of the moment and has to have a truck in the middle of the street, immediately. So I think that's ridiculous. And it's hurting average New Yorkers who drive a car for a living, or drive a van or a truck. And then also this pricing, I heard that there was surge pricing. Is that for Get Around? Surge pricing?
Get around here. No, we don't have surge pricing. The pricing does vary. It's between the type of vehicle that you're using.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier, and you gave us a figure of 10. So is that the lowest of the range, or what's the high? What is the range?
I don't have a top end of the range. The price does not vary that significantly from a weekend to a weekday. Prices across the country go as low as $5 an hour. So it does vary. A majority of our users are lower middle income, so we try to keep prices as low as possible.
Yeah, this is a different kind of neighborhood. This is Manhattan, and space is at so much more of a premium than other places that you're probably doing business. So, and also, are those fees capped? Because once you become a permanent program, how do we have any idea that the price doesn't jump up because you're not getting enough business, or I don't know, the city isn't subsidizing it to the extent that you need it to make money?
I will speak to Get Around. I don't know if we have a cap that I'm aware of, but the pricing does stay pretty consistent. I can definitely follow up with the community district with that information. But we, again, like Stevie said, it for DOT, we will be reporting to them monthly, the amount of people that use the spaces, how many trips are being taken, and a significant amount of data to make sure that the spaces are utilized. And if they're not, then we'll work with DOT to relocate or move spaces.
We're going to take two more. We're going to take two more speakers, Rebecca Lamort and Carol Schusterman. Others, unless we'll only call on board members if they want to make a resolution or something like that. But I don't want to get further speeches because we've taken enough time on this issue. So Rebecca, go ahead.
Thank you, and I'll try and keep it quick because I know we're at the end. First, a clarifying question. So these street swaths, for example, 93rd from Lexington to Park, will all of the public parking be taken between those major avenues?
So
No.
two spaces, it's only two spaces each time.
That's just
Okay.
the closest corner. It'll be on 93rd at Lexington Ave.
Okay. Thank you. And then also, I really want to echo what a number of other board members have said. I have a car in the neighborhood. I priced out parking in a garage, and $700 was the minimum. So hearing we're going to be giving private companies our public space, our public taxpayer space for cents on the dollar is really egregious. I'm not supportive of this as it stands now. Because of that, I would support DOT working with our state lawmakers to change state transportation law so we can charge more. But even then, quite honestly, I don't think I would be supportive of giving our public space and privatizing it for these private companies, because parking, as many people here know and have already said, is really cumbersome in the neighborhood, and it's public parking. We already have some metered spots. We're already seeing changes because of outdoor dining and other things happening in the neighborhood with new loading zones, for example, city bike coming in more. So I'm not supportive of taking, even if it's two spots on a couple of streets. This is really how it starts to me. And then we see more spaces privatized to where one day what we're going to be paying for public parking on the street, that's not something that I want to be moving to long term. So I think DOT really needs to go back to the drawing board with this one and not have our public space be given to private rideshare companies. That's just really not something I'm supportive of at all. But I'd love to hear your feedback.
Thank you, Rebecca. Carol Schusterman. Can we unmute Carol? She's on an iPad, I guess.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I joined the meeting late, so I don't know really what this is all about. I saw something about it, but didn't quite understand. But the point that I would like to make, so I'm living in this area many years. I live in a co-op on 80th and 1st Avenue, across from the Extel site where Hospital for Surgeries is going up. The neighborhood is overrun with trucks double parked all over the place because there's no parking. So many spots have been taken away. And to be very honest, I have a handicap permit, a New York City handicap parking permit. And I feel as though the city does not care about people who are disabled. And I almost feel like I pay taxes here. My taxes are high. And I feel like I don't belong here anymore, that the city doesn't want me. I'm not welcome. That's just how I feel. Because I'm handicapped and I need to use my car. And yet the city is saying to me, in effect, go to hell. Sorry to use that language, but that's how I feel. And I know other people feel the same way. We don't care about you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
I had to make that statement, and I know, you know,
I mean,
I think you understand how we feel. It's bad enough to be disabled. It would be nice if that wasn't the case. But let's face it, we don't have a good transportation system, and we're not safe anymore.
well, I think we on the board have been pressing very hard to try and improve accessibility in our area and to try and do things to alleviate some of the traffic in the area and deal with some of the new challenges that we have, such as a lot of truck deliveries, a lot of the new companies like Amazon and Fresh Direct and Target and everything else that park all over the place. And DOT is working to try to set aside specialized parking areas for them too, to try to do that. So I think it's in a transition, and hopefully we'll see more progress and that you'll feel better about things, you know, after some of these things go into effect. But let me go to Craig. Craig, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. Thank you. And I guess I'll step aside as I just provide a few brief comments. So I just want to make a few points. So I want to just emphasize the fact that right now, I know and completely agree that there is definitely a problem in the sense that we can't charge an appropriate amount for these spaces. But let's all just recall, how much are these spaces generating now? Zero, absolutely nothing. And I think we would have a huge outcry if the city were to propose that that parking spaces be charged fees on side streets right now. We have a lot of free parking, and that is not necessarily a sustainable approach to how spaces are used. So if that were the case, I think there is just this belief that people should be able to have free parking, and that's not the direction that I think society is moving in. And I would think that this would be a chance for us to see other models in which people would have more access to be able to use cars that they wouldn't have. So I think one of the things that I'm struggling with in listening to this is that there seems to be this perception that this is part of a war on car owners. And I think literally this is a proposal to make cars available to the wider public, to those that don't own it. So how could this be viewed as hostile towards cars and car owners? This is meant, I think, as a means of providing other opportunities for people like myself who don't own a car, who may occasionally want to use a car, but don't want to pay the exorbitant rates to rent a car, which are easily over $100 a day.
Yeah, way over.
Which I just experienced. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I work in the suburbs, and I have on many occasions rented cars and taken the train out to the suburbs to rent a car because it is that much more cost effective to do so. And then I think my last point is that I think we're focusing a lot on the car share companies themselves and the fact that they are for-profit companies, but I think that we need to recognize that in the public transportation world, public-private partnerships are a very common thing right now. Whether it be city bike, whether it be delivery of public transportation. I mean, right now, ride-sharing companies, not car share, but ride-sharing companies are often partnering with public transit agencies because it is much more cost-effective from a public standpoint to do this, and it is much more cost-effective for public entities to do this as well. So I want to just remind people that yes, these are large companies and there is a profit motive for sure, but I think sometimes we're losing sight of the fact that the general population may also receive benefits. And if anyone were to look at that UC Berkeley study that was referenced before, there's a lot of information in there and a lot of substantiated research talking about the benefits, environmental benefits and societal benefits that car sharing provides. So while this may not be a perfect proposal, and while I entirely understand that there are some concerns about how trucks are used, I think this is a perfectly reasonable approach to trying something innovative. And I hope that it succeeds. And I hope that it could be a model for how we can have a more equitable society where more people have access to different modes of transportation.
Thank you, Craig. Now I'm just going to call on board members to see if we want to take any action on this. And I know Mohit has not spoken, so why don't we call on Mohit to first?
Chuck, I had a couple questions for DOT. I know you want a resolution right now, so let me know if that's okay.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. A couple questions for DOT. So the first one is, what if one of these on-street spots is, if someone else parks in it during the day and someone can't return their get around there? So what happens in that situation? Is that a double parking situation? Is that a towing situation? We're trying to think out loud about situations where there may be more complexity about on-street parking for these kinds of services as opposed to garage parking. And then two questions about the data behind, or the data that will be collected for this program in order to substantiate the continuation of the program. So one, can you share with us what the thresholds are for usage of these vehicles for the DOT to consider continuing the program? And then two, will the month-to-month reports be made public on some dashboard, or will that be reported in some format to CB8?
All good questions, Rohit. Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead, Stevie, or somebody from DOT?
So each car share company will have their own specific protocol for block spaces. That's what we call when a customer who's using car share comes back to their dedicated space and a regular car is in the spot. More often than not, the customer will call 311 to report illegal parking, because it is considered illegal parking. The car share regulation, signage regulation will say car share parking only. So you will be ticketed. You would call 311, and they would also call the respective car share company, who more often than not would tell the customer to find a legal parking spot to park there, so they know where their car is, and at a later date or later time that day, they can move the car share car back to the car share spot. As far as data, we are working through the threshold and what kind of what we deem a successful utilization rate. We are also working through when and how we will share that data with the community boards at large. We absolutely will be sharing that data. I can't comment right now the frequency and exactly what that will look like, but we will be sharing the data at some frequency throughout the entire year.
Ask him from a wedding ring.
Okay.
And a quick follow-up on the parking situation. So since this has been a pilot for the last few years, I assume that situation has come up. Is it a real issue with the integrity of the program, or does it seem like a manageable issue?
My rings.
So in the beginning of the pilot, it was a real issue. November 2019, we allowed the car share companies to mark the street to say car share parking only, and that dramatically reduced the amount of block spaces. Again, like any new program, it's going to take some time to get used to. So I imagine, when we roll out the program, the first few months, it will take some time to get used to, and then we will see block spaces dramatically reduce again.
Okay, thank you. Just one very quick general comment. I'm generally in support of multiple modes of transportation, particularly forms like car sharing that can lead to more efficient use of the street space and reduce vehicle miles traveled or air pollution traffic and some of the other negatives that we all face every day living in New York. So that's my general framework here. I know I think Paul and Billy had similar comments earlier that I'm very supportive of. But again, I think there are a lot of questions about this program and in particular about the pickup trucks. But thank you.
Okay, let me see. We have Rebecca. I'll go to Rebecca and then Billy. Rebecca Dangor. Go ahead.
Hey, I was going to make a motion, but I don't mind waiting just for Billy to go first. I think I raised my hand after him.
Okay, let's go to Billy then. Go ahead, Billy.
Rebecca, I was also gonna make a motion, but maybe like great jazz artists, we could improvise and see if we can come up with something together, or I defer to you.
I mean, I think as long, we can't really speak before making a motion, so you take it away and just
Well,
wait
you
for a
can,
friendly amendment.
you can make a motion, and if it's seconded, then you can speak to it. So, and one of you, so why don't one of you go ahead and let's get the ball rolling.
Rebecca.
I was going to move that we vote on a resolution that states we cannot support the program at this current time unless, or no, that we
Where's my ring?
request,
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, we
That
should move to,
we
people
cannot
should
support
move.
this.
Sorry.
Sorry, what?
No, I was going to say people should
cannot-
mute themselves. So the transportation people have, because we're getting some feedback here. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was going to move that we state as a board, we cannot support this proposal or this permanent program in its current state, and request that the city council works on legislation to adjust the administrative cost issue, and that any support from our board would be contingent on community input on specific locations in the future. But I'm open to any friendly amendments if it's seconded.
I think, by the way, just one comment on the legislative front. The city may need to get state legislation that allows it to come and if they, you know, you'd have to look and see what it is, because normally the city, when it comes to traffic kinds of things, cannot do things without state authorization. And so
Okay,
it could
then
be-
extend it to city and state.
it could be a more complicated situation, that's all. I don't know, others want to comment? Billy, do you want to make any comment?
Yeah, let me comment, and maybe this can take the form of either friendly amendments or just amendment
Okay,
amendments. but-
if there's, yeah, go ahead.
You know, because I generally agree with where you're going with that, Rebecca. I mean, as I said earlier, I'm a bit more sympathetic to car share, maybe some language, if we agree about it generally being a worthy goal, but I think we're a bit divided on that. Here's what I was going to say. I think urging the city to explore ways to push these companies to use garages, first of all, and whether there needs to be any legal legislative intervention if garages are saying no. I don't know whether legally that's possible, but they should at least review it, because I'm a little bit disturbed by this idea that they can't use the garages at all. And we know in other locations in other cities, and in fact, my understanding is that in this program, garages are supposed to be part of the program. The second was, as you said, raising the administrative fee, I would say to market rate. The third is adamant opposition to pickup trucks being part of this program. And the fourth is to language, making the points I was making earlier about supporting daylighting of intersections and wanting DOT to study how this program is affecting that. If any of that is not friendly,
Most is
I think I would
friendly.
want to propose it. Well, you go ahead, please.
Most is friendly. My only concern is it seems like all of their chosen locations, right, are affecting that cause. And so I think still my original point that they work with the community to identify, you know, the proper parking places might kind of help with that in and of itself. I think it's very strange that we let private companies just choose where to have these spaces. So
By the way, is there a second for this, whatever Rebecca's, we'll call it Rebecca's motion? There should be a second to it. Otherwise, if we go forward here. So is anyone seconding it here that we know of?
Can I get a
I'm
thumbs up?
seconding it.
Okay, thanks, Billy.
So Billy's seconded. Okay. All right. So we have a second. So why don't we continue discussion? Judy Schneider hasn't spoken. So Judy, why don't you go ahead?
Judy put her hand down, so maybe she
Oh.
didn't want to.
Okay. So
Nope, it's back up. Go ahead, Judy.
Judy, go ahead.
I think I want to make a substitute motion because I'm not sure what Rebecca and Billy's motion is.
All right, we'll make the motion. If it's seconded, you can speak to it.
I would approve the car part of
Right.
this proposition and then have a second whereas or a separate resolution disapproving the truck part of this, and all the comments that Billy made just now be part of this resolution.
Is there a second to that? Billy?
I second that.
Billy seconds that. Surprising.
Believe it or not.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion now on the floor. And why don't we have some discussion on this? I'll see Paul Crickler. We'll get to everybody why don't you go ahead, Paul?
Thank you. I'll make it perfectly clear. Exactly what Judy said. I think make it very clear we support the car bit and we do not support the truck bit. The car bit has a couple of caveats. I'd love to see it written that way. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see, Michelle next.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that these get done in multiple resolutions, because all of the points that Billy made were valid. Rebecca put a bunch of things in there. And I also wanted to clarify for Billy that it's not that the garages are not accepting the car share, it's that the garages want market value for the spots. And up until this point, the car shares that were using the garages were getting the spots at discounted rates. And because the demand is so strong for the garage spaces and individuals are willing to spend market value, the garages, being in business, don't want to give the spots away to someone who's going to pay less. But it's not that they're turning them down for any other reason than a business reason. So, but getting back to the separate resolutions, I don't know if this is a substitute or a friendly amendment or whatever it is, but I would like to see one resolution either approving or disapproving the program, and then other resolutions defining what it is that you want included. Because I don't know, it doesn't bother anybody else here that this comes to us as a fait accompli. I mean, this is always very disturbing to me. This is a great conversation if it happened way before the permanent program happened. But right now, frankly, I don't see what we even need a resolution for. They've got their mandate. They're going to see if the spots work. If they're not being used enough, they're going to be moved to other spots that are more lucrative, and the whole ball is in play already. So I don't even know what we're commenting on. But to the extent that you want a resolution, I think there should be one that's clear, an up and down vote as to whether or not you want the program, and then other resolutions defining what you would like to see in it. I think it's too much for one resolution if you combine all of the possible whereases.
Well, you could certainly split things out. And the question is how to do that. And
well, we've done that, part A, part B, like
yes,
that.
I understand, but we could certainly say we approve, let's say we approve the car part of it, we disapprove the truck part of it, have a separate resolution on that. Then the question is, okay, we approve the car part of it with what other things do we want to add to that? And that's probably how we should do it. Then we just want to disapprove the truck part of it when we don't have to do much more than that.
However you handle it.
We can have another resolution on the floor now. You had an original resolution and a substitute.
No, I understand, but the substitute resolution can be split into two parts. We could make it a two-part resolution.
Right. I mean, so I think we should vote on what we've got. And if that doesn't work, then we can go back to Michelle.
Well, the question is, let's make sure we know what we've got too, before we know that. So, well, why don't we have a little bit more discussion, but not too much more, and see if we can get anywhere. Billy, do you want to say anything here?
I just want to make sure Judy's resolution includes the points about market rate charges on the parking spots, and then also just urging the city to explore the garage issue. As I understood what we heard from earlier, it wasn't just about the pricing, it was garages actively not wanting. But Michelle, no matter what it is, I don't think it hurts to just have language saying we'd like the city to look into what's exactly happening if we don't precisely know. So Judy, are both of those in your resolution?
Can I actually read what I have, and Judy can confirm whether this is what should be in there at this point? So right now, the resolution includes approving the car sharing program in partnership with Get Around and disapproving the truck sharing program in partnership with Truck It, and urging the city to explore using garages as parking sites for car share and exploring legislative intervention to accomplish that, and further exploring how to legislatively allow the car sharing companies to be charged with the administrative fee to be increased to market rate, and to accomplish that through legislation, supporting daylighting of intersections and studying how this program affects it, and working with the community to develop to determine the siting of locations on the streets.
Yeah. Well, why don't?
Yeah, that's perfect, Craig. I just want to make another comment to Will, that if the state is involved in this, that the resolution should go to the state as well as city agencies.
Yeah, I think that's
about
right.
that.
That's correct. I think you're correct. Okay, but I think you may want to, I think that's right, Craig, but we may want to put most of that stuff in the first resolved thing, and then have a special second resolve that we disapprove of Truck It. That's all you need there, it seems to me.
Okay.
And we could vote on those separately. So let's why don't we, I see John McClement hasn't spoken yet. John, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I have to admit, I've been sitting here all evening, and I agree with Michelle, wondering why we're doing this. The city has come to us with a fait accompli, as she said. The program's already approved, and I'm opposed to it. But in a way, if it's already approved, what's the point? That's all. Thanks.
I guess. I mean, there is that, but this is just the beginning. They're going to be expanding the program out, and this might be guidance to them in further expansion. So, I mean, we can obviously, it's really up to the committee. We can obviously decide to do nothing, but I think it might pay to give them our sense of what we think ought to be changed as things go forward here.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let me see here. Rita Popper hasn't spoken in a while. I don't think she's spoken. Maybe she did, but it's been so long ago. Who remembers? Go ahead, Rita.
I second what Craig said. He did it perfectly. He did it. Actually, I think it's time to vote. We've been on this subject it is 9:45.
No, it's only 8:45. It only seems like 8:45.
It seems like midnight. And we have a lot more to do.
I agree. Let's see if we can get a couple of quick comments, Rita, and then we'll vote. We've only got a couple.
I second it.
Who want us? Okay, Rebecca, why don't you go ahead?
I'll be really quick. So this resolution, our support is not contingent on whether or not we can increase what the city charges these private companies.
I don't think it's contingent. We're asking them to look at that stuff, but I don't think it's contingent because that's a lot. There's a lot of contingencies built in already to make sure they can change this, if at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I tried to phrase it in the other way, which I knew was more complicated, but I don't think I can even consider the merits of the proposal, given the fact that they're only paying that amount. So.
Okay. Sharon, last, we're going to vote after Sharon has the last word.
I'd like to call the question.
Oh, thank you. Second? Michelle, okay. All in favor? Nobody opposed? Good. Okay, why don't we vote on the resolution? We'll have two votes.
Before we raise hands, can we just lower all hands so I could just do
Accounts?
yeah, account for who's here right now. So right now I see, and let me know if I miss anyone. It's myself, Chuck, Billy, John McClement, John Phillips, Judy, Michelle, Mohit, Paul, Rebecca Dangor, Rebecca Lamore, Rita,
And Sharon?
Sharon, and I think I saw Stephanie down there as well. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Did I miss anyone? I don't believe so. Okay, now people can raise their hands.
Okay. So if you're against the first resolution, which is approving it with the various conditions that Craig read out, you don't have to do anything. But if you are against it or want to abstain, raise your hand. Okay.
All right, so if you're voting no, abstaining, you're not voting for cause. Rebecca Dangor.
Sorry, quick point of information. This does not include the trucking part.
No, this is not, no, the
Trucking is
trucking is
separate.
separate. We're going to vote on that next.
I'm voting no.
Okay.
Rebecca Lamort.
Also, point of information to clarify, this is a resolution to approve the program with a few caveats, yes?
Right, correct.
I'm voting no, thank you.
Okay.
Michelle.
No.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Stephanie, is that we couldn't hear you though. No, I think she's saying no.
She's saying no. We lost your sound though, so you may want to quit and rejoin. John.
I'm voting no.
John,
Thank
no.
you, John. That was John Phillips. Rita Popper.
Abstain.
Thank you, Rita. And then John McClement.
No.
Thank you, John. Any last call? Rebecca, are you changing your vote?
No, I was gonna call to question on part B.
Okay.
Right. Well, part A, it looks like it did not pass. It looks like we had 6 yes, 6 no, and 1 abstention.
So that didn't pass. Okay. Let's go to part B. Part B is the trucking resolution, and that's a resolution in opposition. So anyone who, if you're in favor, you don't have to do anything. But if you're against that, then you could, or abstaining, you should raise your hand. Michelle?
No.
No. Okay.
Wait. I think, Michelle, I thought you were opposed to the truck resolution. You're opposed to trucks, which means you support the resolution. This is disapproving trucks.
No. Well, this resolution, I disapprove of the entire program, whether or not it has caveats. So that was one of the reasons I wanted it broken down. So if you read the wording of the second part of this, I thought I'm just voting.
No, it's a straight disapproval.
caveats.
No, it's a straight disapproval. The way we've done it, we've structured it differently.
Of the truck sharing.
It's a straight disapproval, period.
Oh, so this just has one item, which is disapproving the trucks?
Correct.
Oh, okay. I thought there was some caveats around it. Okay,
No,
so
no.
thank you for calling that out and letting me know, Craig. So I withdraw that no, because I do support no trucks.
Okay, that one looks unanimous, I guess, right, Craig? Or Rebecca, I don't know how you want to vote.
Rebecca, are you voting no, abstaining, or not voting for cause? Oh.
No, she's not.
Really quickly, Rita has her hand up. Rita, are you?
No.
No on that vote. Okay.
Okay. Okay, So that one passed. Now, is there any further, do we want to take any further? Rebecca Dangor, what would you like to do?
Oh, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
I am fine with either a resolution or maybe for the sake of time, a letter from the committee expressing concern about the lack of appropriate charging for a public space, and that we request the city and state legislature to look into adopting the law to enable proper charging of private companies.
I see people. What's the feeling of the committee on that? Rebecca Lamort?
And it does not have to reference any support for the program itself, but it sounds like it's happening, and I'm super uncomfortable that we're not addressing that concern as a board.
Yeah, my issue is I'm still not comfortable with privatizing our public space, even if the state, because transportation law is set by the state. So the city council can't do anything but rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic here. So it would have to be state law, but still, even if they're charging $800 a spot, I don't support privatizing our public space because we already do that so much in other ways. And public parking is something that is so scarce in the neighborhood. So I would not be supportive of the resolution as it reads.
Maybe we just ought to, at this point, let things be the way they are. We have the disapproval of the trucking resolution, and we have nothing on the car one. Okay, why don't we move on at this point? I think that's a reasonable resolution here, and the city will do what it's going to do.
And no letter.
Right, no letter. We're silent. Okay, now to the next issue, which I'm sure there won't be much discussion on, the Alan Stevenson School continuing discussion. Now, I was out of town, and so I wasn't really here, but I was at the previous meeting, and I know exactly what's been happening, what's going on, and I guess the situation is like to hear from anyone at this point about where we stand in terms of any further discussions between the school and the neighbors. And I know we have people here from the school. We can hear from them first, and then we'll hear from the neighbors. So do we want to have, does anyone want to be first for the school here? Is it Duncan the Lion?
Yes, I'd be happy to start this off. I'm happy to report, I think we've made some progress since the last meeting. So thank you for the opportunity to do so. Given that this is a school night, and given that we have been around here for a while tonight, we will try and be succinct. Hope everyone will appreciate that. We would just want to let you know, yesterday night we met with the representatives of the Block Association as well as DOT. And tonight we're just going to review efforts we've made to improve patient accessibility, modifications we have made on the street to reduce noise, and also we'll give you an update on the play roof. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to everyone's favorite neighborhood ambassador, Chris Acerbo.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon, for that great introduction, and good evening, everybody. I am Chris Acerbo. I'm the Director of Security here at Alan Stevenson. And I want to address the first concern of our neighbors was accessibility to the block for the residents, as well as accessibility for patients who had appointments with doctors' offices located on 78th Street. So in addition to informing and instructing the guard that works the detour every day at 78th and Park, we did issue to the residents of the block resident access passes and patients access passes. And let me just be clear that these are of no association with the Department of Transportation. These were created by Alan Stevenson solely. And basically what there are is just to expedite the process. If somebody lives on the block, if somebody has an appointment on the block, rather than having to have a conversation with the guard at the corner, who has been informed that they should have access if they ask, They just need to show one of these access passes and they will be immediately given access to the street. So expedite onto the street for residents to their homes and expedite the process for any patients who have appointments with the doctor's offices on the block. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so the next slide is an overview of East 78th Street from Park Avenue to Lexington Avenue. And this overview slide is going to serve a few purposes. The first thing we did, as Duncan had mentioned, we've had a modification, reduce the size of the actual footprint for the play space. If you see the blue dashes on the left, that is the actual west building line for Allen Stevenson. And that's where the Play Street now starts. And that runs to the corner of 78th Street and Lexington Avenue. So what we've done, we've pretty much taken 1/3 of the block as opposed to the entire block. And what that does is it opens up access to the street. And if you see we pointed out our neighbors. You have Dr. Lipkin at 111. You have Dr. Cassell and Jacques Blinbaum at 114. You have the Stammels, who are neighbors who live at 118. Brian Verona, who's the Block Association president, is at 122. And Dr. Warren, who actually spoke at the first meeting back in September, he has a practice at 875 Park. So what this does is, in addition to allowing access for the residents and the patients, it opens up that space for them to have access to the street and have access to their homes and have access to the doctor's practices. In addition, since the students are playing in front of the school now, that lessens the amount of noise that the students will be creating in front of our neighbors, as well as the doctor's offices. So just to review it, with the Play Street moved in front of the schoolhouse, the students aren't playing in front of the doctor's offices, and that reduces the amount of noise. And if you go back, just go back to that. And not only did we limit the play space area, we also limited the amount of students that are actually using the street at a given time. Okay. The next issue was the bike lanes, and everyone at Allen Stevenson is committed to keep that bike lane open. And as you can see, there is a clip of the bike lane in front of Allen Stevenson, and I can say that was not staged. That is live footage. Now, is there exceptions? There are exceptions to that, of course. A lot of times the bicyclists come down, they see the students playing, they'll get off their bikes, they'll deviate to the sidewalk, but we strongly encourage the bicyclists to use that bike lane, and everyone's on board, faculty, the staff, and the students. We have teachers with whistles. We have security personnel stationed on the street who advise the students that there is a bike in the bike lane, and we're all committed in keeping that bike lane open. Next slide. Okay, with the addition of reducing the size of the play space, we've opened up curb space for parking on the street. So the neighbors can access the street and they can access their homes with their cars. In addition, if someone has an appointment on the block, the patients have access to the street and they have access to the curb space to stand and wait for that patient to get out of their appointments. In addition, you have curb space for deliveries, for contractors. So there's an additional curb space on the block now that the students are only using the footprint in front of the school. And as I mentioned last month, anybody on the block who has an issue with the Play Street is regarding access or any issue at all with open street on 78th Street, they can contact me. Right. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Charlie Parente, who is the owner's rep of Allen Stevenson, who's been involved in the recent construction project.
Thanks, Chris. So just a brief update on the status of the play space. The construction of the play space has actually been completed. However, our contractor is still in the process of working on commissioning certain high-rise related building systems that are required. Once those systems are online, the contractor will set up the FE&Y inspection, which is then the last step before submitting all the required items to DOB for TCO issuance. At this stage, it appears that we're looking at end of this year, early next year for that TCO to be obtained for the play space.
Thank you, Charlie. And we've heard good feedback from our neighbors about the modifications. We thought we'd bring in one neighbor who's actually directly across from the school, Mr. Lewis Black.
Mr. Black here.
Hello, good evening. Yes, I mean, as Headmaster Lyon said, that I've actually been directly impacted by this, because by bringing all the kids right outside the school, my noise level has increased. But to be perfectly honest, I think the Open Streets program is a fantastic idea by TOT. And I would much prefer to hear a few kids, because there's only about 20 out there at any one time, and they're only out there for 10, 15 minutes. I'd much rather hear them playing on the street than the normal sort of chaos that you hear during the day, especially around the corner from Lenox Hill Hospital. So, and also it's not just kids that are on the street, everyone's using it. This is what I don't understand, why this is even being talked about. Everyone is able to use this sort of oasis in the middle of really the center of Upper East Side. I mean, it's such a great idea. But I have no problem with this noise. I much prefer to hear that than what I used to hear. So to be perfectly honest, I'm fully supportive of this and hope the DOT continues to support this program in this street.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
Thank you, Mr. Black. And now for another perspective from our Parents Association president, we thought we'd bring in Carrie Ann Evans Thompson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie Ann Evans Thompson, and I'm a proud parent of the Allen Stevenson School. My son, Cassius, has been a student at Allen Stevenson since he was 5 years old. So we're a big part of this community. First, I'd like to thank the Department of Transportation for this initiative, for the Open Street program, because it's been a huge benefit for not only my son, but hundreds of other Allen Stevenson students. And matter of fact, when my son found out that we were going to now have the Open Street program, he was very excited, because so many of his other friends of other schools have had the opportunity to benefit from the Open Streets program. I'd also like to thank the community board for the opportunity to give my perspective, to give the perspective of the parent and what it means to our sons. Right now, the fact that our sons could go out for 20 minutes for fresh air to really enjoy the opportunity to engage with their friends has been so beneficial in so many different ways, not only physically, but the emotional element of it. Coming out of the last 2 years, as a parent, I could only share how important it is for the kids to be engaged and outside. So I thank you all. I also like to talk about the fact that, you know, as a New Yorker and as a parent of Allen Stevenson, we're a very diverse community. We come from 5 different boroughs, no, actually with the exception of Staten Island. And we're very much New Yorkers, and we are from New York, and we are supportive of New York, and we are for New York. With that said, we also feel very much a part of the 78th Street community. And matter of fact, as you can see here, on Monday, we came together as a community in fellowship and celebrating All Hallows Eve all together. I think I probably gave out thousands of pieces of candy in front of Allen Stevenson, but it was certainly an opportunity for us to celebrate and to be with our neighbors. So again, I thank you all for the opportunity to share that perspective and to tell you how much these open streets have benefited not only my son, but hundreds of other Allen Stevenson students. So thank you.
Thank you, Seven.
That's the end of our presentation. For questions.
Okay, let me just ask one question before we turn it over to the public. What happens when the place, area is open then? How is that affecting the open street situation then? If next year it's, that's opened up?
Is that a question for the school or a question for DOT?
Well, the school first.
Well, we intend to use the space, right, for physical education and other recreational needs. So we intend to use the play space as soon as we can get it open. We still, again, see the benefit of the Open Streets program. I know there's been some conversation. We were able to tour some neighbors and show them our good space, but ultimately there's a paucity of play space in our school, and we want to take full advantage of every opportunity we have to get our boys out in fresh air recreating. But
so you would
we are
still,
eager to get the play space open.
You would still want the open street situation then. That's the point I wanted. Right? That's what you're saying.
We think it's a great program. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's hear from the public a little bit. First hand I saw up was Lauren Cassell. Can we hear from Lauren?
I'd like to defer and let Brian and
Okay.
Jacques speak first, because they did meet with the school, and then I would like to give my comments after, if you don't mind.
Sure. No, absolutely. Sure. Brian, go ahead. Brian Verona.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm Brian. I'm Block Association President, 78th between Park and Lex. I live at 122, as they showed in the diagram. As Block Association President, I'm a repository for lots of neighbor comments, emails, and texts. So everyone kind of shares their concerns with me, including pictures of various issues with the Open Street program, which includes, blocking of the bike lane, bikes on the sidewalks, trucks blocking 78th Street access, et cetera, et cetera. We did indeed, with Jacques, met with the school and DOT last night. And thank you for hosting us. And we actually had the opportunity to tour the new outdoor play area. So we appreciate it. At the end of the day, it's fairly, most of our neighbors, I can speak to 10 to 2 handfuls of residents, plus representatives from the co-op buildings, do not think that the Open Street program is compatible with the fabric of the residential and commercial businesses on the block, particularly the commercial businesses. I agree with Michelle Birnbaum's comments that as it related to the previous program, that this wasn't brought before the community board when it was approved. It was grandfathered in from the pandemic. And we really wish we'd have the opportunity to do this before these licenses are granted. I would also say that, I appreciate what the school has done. I think it's gone a long way to make it better. But I look forward to them, using their roof terrace which is outdoor space, when it's ultimately ready, hopefully as soon as possible. I would say that, as per the Parent Association Chair, President, that Halloween is indeed a special day. It's always been a special day on the block, independent of open streets. We typically just close it up. But yes, there are special reasons to close street, and I think Halloween is a great example of that. And the last thing I would say is that children can get, fresh air by going to Central Park, like they did for every other year up until 3 years ago, and eventually the outdoor roof deck when it's ultimately available. So I thank you for listening, and I'll pass the mic to Jacques.
Okay. Lauren, did you want to not go wait for Jacques here? Yes, she says, okay.
Yeah.
Why don't we go to Jacques Blinbaum?
Hi, am I unmuted? I guess I am.
You are.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for this time. And I also want to especially thank Duncan Lyon and Chris from Allen Stevenson. Although we disagree, I think what's happened is over the past couple of weeks since our last meeting, now we're disagreeing without being disagreeable. And I think that's a giant step that we've taken. And Duncan, I tell you honestly, you're a good guy, you know, and I enjoy meeting with you, and I enjoy exchanging our views on these issues. And I can say I've never worked with anybody who has tried harder to help find a constructive, you and Chris, a constructive resolution to our differences. We did meet. Included in that meeting was the DOT representative, and it became very crystal clear to us that no matter what community board does, no matter what we do, no matter how much we complain, this is not going to go away this year, no matter what. And so, so that's a fait accompli. And the best that we can do right now is work together with the school to mitigate the situation, to mitigate the inconvenience, and move forward, you know, with the reality as it exists. You know, I was really thrilled to go up and see the play space that they built on the top of their building, which right now they're not able to use, but hopefully by next year they will be able to use. In my view, the amount of space that play roof has is approximately equal to the amount of street space there is directly in front of their building, you know, and it's a beautiful space and it's an outdoor space. And I'm sure that once the kids are able to use it, it'll be a big, big, big plus. You know, the reality is that I don't think community board is going to have any influence on DOT on this matter. I think that the powers at DOT have this view about the entire open street program in such a way that anything we do to rock the boat on 78th Street has the potential to impact the entire program citywide. And so I don't believe that there is any possibility that they're going to listen. So as I've said to the school, to Duncan, to Chris, you know, the neighbors don't believe that this public space, that the school should on this street have the right to take over the public space to the detriment of those people that live and work on this space. And so I said, we're like a dog with a bone. You know, we're going to have to figure out a way to get our voices heard, whatever that may be. We realize that the Community Board 8 is not going to be the vehicle that's going to allow us to succeed. We even believe that working with DOT is not going to be a route that's going to allow us to succeed. And so we're going to just, you know, do whatever we can to protest this going on into next year. And we want to do it in a meaningful way. We want to do it in a friendly way. We don't want to have bad feelings between the school and its neighbors. It doesn't work for anybody's advantage. So you know, the argument continues, you know, but for the time being, you know, we feel that at least we have an open channel of communication, and we hope that we can mitigate the inconvenience to the people on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Cassell, back to Lauren.
I think I'm muted. First of all, I do want to thank the school for all the accommodations that they have made by moving the kids down the street, which certainly has decreased the noise and the activity right in front of my office. I mean, maybe to the detriment of the people who are at the other end of the street. On the other hand, it has still taken over our public space and has impacted access. I appreciate the fact that you may have given out passes that are given for, I should give passes to my patients. I don't know how you expect me to do that. I see approximately 60 patients a week. How am I supposed to get them passes to be able to come? And these are 60 different patients. Every week it's a different 60 patients. How am I supposed to get them passes that they're supposed to give to the guard that is at the gate? The other thing is how are they supposed to leave? For example, I had a patient who was 103 years old who came to my office with her niece. Combus mentis, a lovely long-term patient. Okay. When she was ready to leave, she had to have the niece walk to the corner to tell the guard when the car comes that he should let the car come through and then come back to the 103-year-old patient. I had another patient who called an Uber, okay, to come pick her up. She has had 13 hip operations and walks with crutches, okay? Uber wouldn't come down the block because the street was closed. Okay, so then she has to try and get another Uber again, explain to them to be able to tell the guard that they are coming to a doctor's office to pick them up. Okay, what about the patient who comes by taxi and then needs to get a taxi to come home? Okay, there are no taxis coming down our block any longer for these patients to be able to access a taxi. So I understand if somebody is smart enough to be able to come with a car and ask the guard to let them in, that the guard will let them in. We're trying to tell all the patients when we confirm appointments that they do have access to the street if only they were to tell the guard. The question is, how do they get out of the street? That's my other question. The other point that I like to make is, what's the story with these buses, school buses parking on the street all day long? I'm taking pictures of them with the drivers sleeping. There was one parked in front of my office, must have been for 4 hours with the driver sleeping there. The next day, there were 2 buses parked on the street. And this is not just before pickup. Okay, they're parked there with the driver sleeping on the street, waiting a couple of hours to go pick up. Are we also now a parking lot for school buses? I think this is ridiculous. Okay, the other thing is, I do very much appreciate Alan Stevenson's participation in our Halloween celebration. We, grassroots, started long more than 10 years ago. Okay, it started off as grassroots with people decorating and some of the homes opening up and giving out candy. And I'll remember the first year it happened, the street was so crowded, then cars were still coming through, that we got concerned that somebody was going to get hurt. And we took a cone and blocked off the street, okay, to protect the children. The following year, I started out by calling the 19th precinct before Halloween to ask them how could we close off the street. They told me I had to it was a party, I needed to block party, get a permit, do this, that, and the other things. I said, you don't understand. These kids just come trick-or-treating and it's dangerous. And so finally the desk sergeant said to me, lady, you didn't hear it from me. Just do what you did the year before. Just block off the street. So we have been entertaining, not just the Upper East Side, we have been entertaining all of New York City, coming from other boroughs, very diverse community. It is not Alan Stevenson that brought this diverse community to our 78th Street. It was we as a street who have opened up our homes on Halloween for all of these children. And I must say, I do resent them taking ownership of it this year. Okay, I'm glad they joined us, but we as a street have been doing this for the past 10 or 15 years without the help of Alan Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we should wrap it up there.
We would like to have our street back.
Okay, thank you. What is about, I'd like to ask the Alan Stevenson, what about the school? That's an issue that wasn't discussed here. What about the school bus parking for, hours at a time?
I'll comment on that. That is absolutely unacceptable. We have school buses for commuting, and then we have school buses for sports. The commuting buses from the city, that they would never get there early because they're so busy. But there might be times when the sports buses arrive early. And what Dr. Cassell mentioned is totally unacceptable. And if I see any buses there early, I will address it myself.
Okay. Pamela is next. Pamela, can you give us your full name for the record too?
Dr. Pamela Lipkin. I'm at 111 East 78th Street.
Okay.
I think Dr. Cassell really hit upon the great difficulties of allowing patients to arrive at office appointments and leave. But it's actually quite a bit worse than that. Could you imagine having to obtain permission from a guard to go to your own home? And sometimes it's a very hostile encounter. I mean, your home is supposed to be a place where you can relax, a quiet space, a stress-free place, especially in this complex world. The comforts of home are so important, especially as you get older. And that has been completely robbed of the residents on the street. Basically, the open street program, which was supposed to be open street for everyone, has been basically a closed street for everyone except the school. What this program has allowed Alan Stevenson to do is privatize the public space. It's for their use. Drop-offs, the buses are much worse than Dr. Cassell mentioned. I have photographs this morning of 6 buses parked on the street almost all day. Parked on the street. 78th Street is now a bus terminal. And what's worse is the buses run their engines, maybe because the drivers need air conditioning and the exhaust is just, it's just gross. The block now is basically a parking garage for buses, in case you didn't know this. So they privatized our public space. They are actually admitting how much their activities have damaged the sanctity of the street by actually moving the kids further towards Lexington, et cetera. But, you know, you can only be like Jacques said, it's a fait accompli. Nobody cares about the people on the street. It's like who wins. And I'm not going to fight this fight anymore. I'm getting too old. It's causing a great deal of stress. I dread coming home if I'm operating. I actually wait until after 5 o'clock so I don't have to listen to the screaming and the balls and getting past the security guard with all my surgical equipment. It is absolutely horrific. And I cannot believe actually that this is our 3rd meeting and we're still putting up with this atrocity. And I don't understand why it's even happening. That is really what bothers me the most. This school has doubled their footprint. And when their footprint was half of what it is, they managed to graduate thousands and thousands of kids when their school was much smaller for decades, for a very long time, almost 100 years, actually. And now all of a sudden they doubled the size of their school with CB8 permission, with the promise that they keep the census the same. And I just don't understand why they need the street, which by their concessions, admits that they have really killed our businesses and our enjoyment of our homes. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Next is Amy Rappaport McKenna. Can we unmute Amy?
Thank you so much. I've attended now a few of these meetings. I'm not part of the Alan Stevenson community. I'm a resident in the building. I spoke at the last meeting because we completed a massive renovation project on time, and the street closure did not affect us. In fact, the guards and Mr. Acerbo and his team were very helpful and very easy to communicate with. We submitted a letter from our general contractor. I heard for several hours this community board really thinking about the greater good of this community with regard to parking spaces, 8 parking spaces. And it is so distressing to hear that the health and well-being of children in this city, residents, is not paramount, of which at the last meeting, the representative from the DOT said, this is the only school that has received complaints about the street closure. I just want you to think about that. These children, regardless of the pandemic, the city has decided outdoor space is paramount to these kids. The school has said the only school that's received complaints has made tremendous concessions and trying to work with the community to make it better. Yesterday, I watched a wonderful old elderly woman with her caretaker with a walker stand and watch the children, these little boys playing with balls. She was having the time of her life, whether she's thinking about her son or grandson, but it was a moment of New York. I watched an ambulance this morning go right through the gates easily. The guard just moved the one cone and the ambulance went right through. It's workable, but I'd just like you to think about the greater good of our city, the greater good of our children, that we can't give this to them. I think that's really hard when you don't want to give up parking spaces. And, you know, I'm not on the community board. I'm not educated enough to make decisions like this. You're asking good questions for that. I think you need to ask some good questions for this, which is a little outdoor space is important. A little breathing room, a little unstructured time. Public schools have it. The city has said this is important. I love hearing the laughter. I love seeing the kids play.
Okay.
I think
Thank
it's joyous and joyful.
Thank you. Okay, let's get to someone who hasn't spoken before, and Nam.
Yes. Well, kudos to Alan Stevenson for making some improvements, but it's still called a public street being used by a private school, which I find interesting. I have a recommendation, and that is that the children enjoy the outdoors, if that's what's going to happen, but without flying objects, meaning paper airplanes, which come at me in the bike lane, footballs, bouncing balls, Nerf balls. This makes the bike lane very dangerous for many reasons, which means children and balls run into the bike lane. They can still go outside if that's what's been decided in front of the school, but I would recommend eliminating the flying objects. That would help in safety on the bikes. And I applaud you for your video, but I also have a video that shows children in the bike lane with the balls and paper airplanes flying. So it's a safety issue, which I think you can address with not too much effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Reckler. Stephanie?
Yes, thank you. I'm surprised that Anne was the first person to talk about safety, because that is really my concern. I like the boys playing is delightful. I appreciate that. They're lovely young children, and the joy that they have running around is a joy that is transmitted to anybody who watches them. But that being said, you just can't control them as hard as you try, and they really are trying hard. They run into the bike lane, they run onto the sidewalk. You can't help that, you can't contain them. And one day there's going to be an accident. Somebody's going to get hurt. Either it's going to be a biker, a student, or a pedestrian. Will, I sent you a video that was taken 2 days ago. Could you share it with everybody, please?
I'll see if I can get it in a format that I can put in the chat for people to download.
Because on a bright, beautiful day, they were having a wonderful time, but they were in the bike lane. They were on both the north and the south sidewalks, and you just can't help that. And it would be best for them to go up to their roof deck. It's the same fresh air and a safer environment. And I look forward to when that happens.
Thank you,
Thank
Stephanie.
you.
And let me, I want to ask Colleen, because Colleen, you're here still, I see you.
Yeah, I'm here, Chuck. What do you want to ask me?
So people seem to feel that there's no way that the Department of Transportation would, cancel this play street, even if we recommended it. Is that what's happening at this point?
Well, Chuck, I don't want to say that's what's happening at this point, but I want to say that we are continuing to work with the Stephen Allenson School and with the community. And, we want to give them a chance to see, how far these improvements are going to go before we take the next steps. So we like to give them the benefit of the doubt and try to, work with, the association, the block association and the school. And we've been having discussion with the association, the school and, residents on the block.
Well, what is the question? I guess the question is how long this street goes for how long? It's the school year till next, is it next May or whatever it is?
Yeah, it's when school is in session, correct.
Okay. And then what about the next year after that? How does that work?
Well,
is it automatically renewable, or is that something that has to be looked at again?
We're going to look at it again based on the feedback that we've been getting from the community. We are going to be looking at this again. Yes.
Yeah, because as someone made the point, they were trying to make an opposite point, but I think we have these streets, but the only complaint that we have is to the Allen Stevenson School, and and the community here seems fairly upset still about, and the doctors particularly, about the situation. And so I think that's something that needs to be looked at very seriously here, because we don't have these complaints at other, in other areas.
And we are, Chuck, we're looking into it, I assure you.
Okay, well, I'm going to call on the board folks now, and we'll see what kind of things people would like to do. Paul Crickler first. Go ahead, Paul.
Chuck. I completely agree with Lewis and with Amy. In fact, I go one stage further. I think every single school in New York City, whether it's private or public or charter of any type, should have a street in front of it without traffic, without cars. Other places do this. It works, and they're kids. I see no better use of what is public space. The space, unfortunately, doesn't belong to each of us as we live on that street. I'm voting as a member of the board who's trying to represent the community, 75% of which do not own cars. I will also mention as an anecdote, there's another one like this, I think on 84th, Madison and Park, where just last week I got off my bike, I was riding through on 84th, I thought, this is nice, the kids are playing here, I'll walk my bike instead. I just did. It's a very nice place to be when kids are out. And other people do use it as well, people sit there as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Michelle is next. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. I'd like to make a resolution, and if seconded, then speak to it. And my resolution is that this play street remain open until the appropriate permits are offered for the play roof, and when it's in full operation, that the street be closed and the children's activity be moved to the roof. If there's a second, I'd like to speak to this.
Is there a second? Is anyone at this point seconding it?
If I could get a thumbs up from anybody if you want a second.
No, I haven't seen anyone seconding yet.
Are the hands up?
I don't know what Rita.
Stephanie?
Rita.
Generally speaking, we use the thumbs up emoji as or somebody visually giving a thumbs up as a second.
Oh, there, Stephanie did.
Okay. So Stephanie seconded. Okay, go ahead.
So let me just speak to it. I appreciate the efforts of the Allen Stevenson School. They certainly acted in good faith. Everybody did. The issue is they are one of the few schools that actually have a roof playground. The fact that it's not operational at this moment doesn't mean that it won't be. They spent a lot of money on it. They made an investment in it, and the purpose was as a play area for the children to play. And the recess will take place on that roof in the same kind of schedule as they have for the street. When you have so many people on that block so upset about this, I don't know how you can ignore it. Professional offices and private homes. Also, when you talk about handing out permits, first of all, I'm not even sure that that's legal, that you can print your own permit and have people hand it out as though it had some kind of authority. But whether or not that's the case, I appreciate the effort, but there's no way a doctor can hand out these permits to patients. What about the first-time patient? It presumes that when a patient comes that they'll be back next week, and so you can give them a permit. There's no way to arrange to give these permits to people who might have an appointment 4 months later or not at all. The other thing is you have a car or a taxi or an Uber coming down this street, and the only way they can get out is to make a U-turn and go back out to park. Now they're going in the wrong way on a one-way street. What about another car that's trying to come in going the right way? That is a very, very dangerous situation, not only for the street, but when that car going the wrong way because they made a turn, now has to go on to Park Avenue. The cars that are coming north on Park Avenue are not used to seeing a car coming out of an eastbound street coming west. It's a very, very dangerous situation. It's not that they don't have an alternative. They have an alternative. The residents do not have an alternative. Alan Stevenson is asking for too much. They're just asking for too much. I urge this board to pass this resolution saying, keep the street with the modifications that you've made until the roof is fully occupiable. It needs a C of O. Whenever that happens, move your program to the roof as you probably had intended to do anyway. Having 2 outdoor areas is an embarrassment of riches. Please listen to your neighbors. There's no reason that they have to be agitated in their place of where they live and where they work. It's really too much to ask. And I really ask this committee and then the board to please support this resolution. It hurts nobody. It's a great compromise. It's one that's planned for and everybody wins. I don't see why it has to be double or nothing. One group gets everything and one group gets nothing. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Please support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, let's go to Sharon Pope Marshall next.
Thank you, Chuck. I agree with Paul. I love hearing children play. I am so happy that they're able to play out in the street. And I will tell you from grades 1, grades 1 through 6, during each lunch hour, my school let out onto a city street many years before the Play Street program. And I still have fond memories of that time. And so I am surprised that there's such acrimony with respect to hearing children play, hearing children laugh. I find that it's very comfortable for me, and it just and in some cases is just very inspiring for me. That's it. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Sharon. Rita Popper is next. Rita.
I support or second Michelle's resolution. New Yorkers have got to give up something sometimes. We all know what people gave up during the Second Avenue subway for 10 years. This is a closed end, as Michelle said. As soon as the roof is available, everybody will move to the roof and this problem will go away. I call the question.
Well, you're not supposed to make a motion after you spoke. So let me call on Judy first. Go ahead, Judy.
I call the question.
Okay. Is there a second? I assume if someone wants a second to calling of the question on Michelle's motion, they should do it. Otherwise, we won't have it.
Rita Popper.
Rita Popper, okay. All in favor of calling the question? Is anyone opposed to calling the question at this point? Raise your hand if you are. Board members, that is. Okay, hearing none.
Let me announce the roll then.
Right.
Myself, Chuck, John McClellan, John Phillips, Judy, Michelle Mohit, Paul, Rebecca Dangor, Rebecca Lamort, Rita, Russell, and Sharon and Stephanie.
Right, that's what I see. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So if you're in favor of this motion is that once the play area is ready to go, that the play street be discontinued. You don't have to do anything, but anyone opposed or abstaining from this should raise their hand.
Anybody voting no, abstaining, not voting for cause. Judy Schneider is up first.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Judy. Paul Crickler.
No.
Thanks, Paul. Let me give a last call. Craig.
I'm going to raise my hand for myself. No.
Thank you, Craig.
So that resolution passes.
That resolution passes. Okay. So it'll be before the full board on, let's see, the 16th, November 16th. Okay, we thank everyone and appreciate all the work that's been done and will be to be continued at the full board. Okay.
Yeah, can I just ask, I apologize for this.
Yes, of course.
When I announced the votes on the original resolution, I know Sharon spoke at that point, but I didn't get her on my roll. Did she vote on the original, on the car sharing resolutions? It won't change the vote, the outcome, but I just wanted for my records confirm whether.
Sharon?
No, I voted. No, I think I did not. You only asked for people who were against it. I was
right, but I didn't see you on the list at that point, or I didn't see your name, so I didn't.
No, you
record
called
your
my
vote.
name. You went down the list. Yeah, you did when initially before that particular vote. You did.
Okay, so what did you vote on it? Because I don't have it.
Okay.
You talking about the car sharing, the first one?
Yes, I just want to make sure I have the.
I thought she voted yes on that.
Yeah, I voted in support of it. I did not say anything.
Okay, so you voted yes on that and then
Yeah.
yes on both. Okay, so I announced the wrong total, but it didn't change the outcome of the votes.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so the next item is discussion of how to address parking placard abuse, which is something we've been talking about for a long time. And I guess I'd like to ask, is Colleen still around? I'm looking to see if she's still here.
No, Colleen shot me a message just about 10 minutes ago that she was leaving.
Oh, okay.
7 minutes ago, to be exact.
All right. Because I mean, we've been discussing this and I think it seemed to a number of people that the way to deal with this is to have an automated system where all of the parking placards are entered into a system, and it's easy enough for the traffic enforcement people who go around and look at these things to find out whether or not something is legal or not, or expired or not, and that there ought to be a centralized way to where these parking placards are issued, probably from the Department of Transportation. So there's control over how they're issued, and that we ought to make an effort to try and reduce the number of parking placards. But if you have an automated system, it makes everything much easier. And I don't know whether, I mean.
Well, actually, Chuck, if you don't mind, I had put together a little, some
please.
slides that actually highlight the actions that were taken and then what we did in response to hopefully bring us to where we are right now. So, Will, if you could just put that up on the screen, I could walk everyone through it very briefly.
Yep.
All right, so, and then we'll make sure that this gets posted and shared. But what I did here is basically I highlighted 8 local laws that were passed by the city council into law in 2019. So if you recall, there was a package of legislation, and I believe Powers was one of the leaders on this effort, and it resulted in a number of laws that were passed as listed here. And I think some of them included some of the programs that Chuck, that you just alluded to, although I think some of it also, I thought the electronic placard program was a mayor's office initiative.
Right, I think you're right.
Which never actually got funded or implemented. So we can look through this and review the laws that were passed. And then if you go to the third slide, you'll see that in response to the lack of progress that we had seen, even in light of the new laws, Community Board 8 passed this resolution regarding assignment of traffic enforcement as the sole parking placard enforcing agency, restoring budget cuts for the dedicated parking placard enforcement unit that was cut in 2020, asking for the retirement of all agency issued placards and requiring that new digital placard system that we discussed, and assessing the number of agency placard permits and specific reasons for them being issued, and reducing the number of placards that are issued to city agencies, doctors, clergy, and the media. So we passed that resolution, and then if you go to the next slide, these were all of the different ideas that we had thrown around back in February of 2021. So it's a slightly extensive list. And then currently, from what I could tell, there are 3 pieces of proposed city council legislation that are proposed thus far in this current cycle. And you can see there's Intro 500, which would prohibit any city agency from issuing parking permits to private vehicles that don't have an elected official license plate. Wait, I think I copied that, so I think that's it. And would provide for the revocation of such parking permits. The bill would not apply to parking permits issued for people with disabilities or to parking permits required to be issued pursuant to the terms of a collective bargaining agreement. So there would be some exceptions there. And then 501 would require DOT to create a civilian reporting program. This is sort of what some people refer to as the bounty program, where civilians can call in violations. And then there's Intro 660, which would require DOT to create a parking permit enforcement unit that would be dedicated to enforcing parking permit matters. So I'm not sure that we're interested in taking any positions on any of that, but those are some of the current proposals that are being discussed in the city council. And then if you go to the last slide, our outstanding questions that I was hoping DOT would be able to weigh in on was the status of the deliverables from the 2019 parking placard bills, the status of the digital pay-by-play program, which originally was supposed to be implemented in 2021. Then they announced, no, it's going to be 2022, but clearly we haven't seen anything with that. And also the status of that, of the funding for the parking placard enforcement unit. So that sort of is our recent history in terms of what we've discussed here. I hope that was helpful.
No, very helpful. Very helpful. But, obviously we passed a resolution that was pretty good. That was just 2021. And I guess the question is, we need to find out what's happening to some of this stuff. And probably we need to get DOT and get our council members also to maybe show up and see if we can come up with a way to, get DOT to say what's really happening with this stuff. Michelle, you want to comment? Go ahead.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, that was very helpful, Craig. That was really excellent, as your presentations always are. You're a good researcher. What I would like to say, in light of what we did earlier in this meeting, this whole issue of placards, speaking just for myself, is a non-issue now. If we can give away spots on the street to out-of-town businesses for their own personal profit and benefit, I don't see how we can, in good faith, be so worried about city workers, the handicap, doctors.
Not the handicap. We're not. This is nothing.
You're not, okay, but doctors, firefighter, whoever is in quote taking advantage of this program as perceived by some to be taking advantage of it. Those are local people that are working here in the city, that support this city, that pay taxes in this city, that use this city. And I'm much more in favor of them having placards than I am in favor of businesses coming and taking over the streets. So I have lost my complete enthusiasm about this program because I think it's out of line in light of what else this committee has passed. So just, that's my thoughts about it anyway.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Well, I think we're going to schedule a further hearing, Craig, on some of this stuff and see if we can get DOT to come back and report to us on this and also talk about some of the various ideas that we have.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to do that. I want to make sure that if anyone has any immediate thoughts that they wish to put out there for us to try to consider or ask of DOT as we try to figure out if there's someone there who can brief us, now's the time to bring that up.
You have one hand up from
Ben Ratner. I see. Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for letting me talk for just a little bit. I appreciate everything that that you've all done in the past. I'm relatively new here, but there's a particular safety issue that I've been experiencing by 77th between Park and Lex at Lenox Hill Hospital, where illegally parked cars stop ambulances from getting to the entrance, have caused the fire department to get around cars to access hydrants, caused bikes to drive into traffic, ambulances to park at all sorts of other roads because there are cars parked in the ambulance only parking. They all have expired, irrelevant, or homemade placards. If the hospital is reliant on these 10 to 20 spots that these cars take up, we certainly have bigger problems. Almost that entire area is no parking, no standing, ambulance only, 15-minute parking only. None of those observed. And there's similar issues on 77th between 3rd and Park and 76th between Park and Lex. But specifically right by the hospital, it's just a very dangerous situation that if there was not the congestion of all the illegally parked cars, the hospital would be a much safer place.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I know that's an issue. That's one of the issues that we want. That's why one of the reasons we want to address placards. And so there would be less excuse for not doing something about placards. But I think we probably need to have the traffic enforcement people go around the hospital areas and see if they can do something in the near term.
Right. So I just want to alert everyone that we just posted in the chat a link to the New York City Council, which had actually done a project where they have essentially mapped all of the 311 complaints regarding parking placard complaints. And I invite everyone to take a look at that, and you will see, if you look at it, that there are definitely areas, 78th between 3rd and Lex. Actually, no, that's 85th between 3rd and Lex, but right around Lenox Hill on 77th between Lex and Park, you can see that there is a concentration of placards, placard complaints that have come in. But this identifies some of the locations that are particular issues and have been over the years, and I think this can help inform our future discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Okay, well, since DOT is not here, we won't have any updates from the Department of Transportation.
And Colleen emailed to say that she didn't have any.
Okay. Do we have any old or new business that anyone wants to raise before we adjourn?
I do have a person from the chat who said she would like to speak on that last issue. Susan, you're unmuted now.
It's okay, go ahead. Where's
Susan, just speak up.
I don't see Susan. Let me see.
You're unmuted. All right, guess her
Okay.
microphone isn't working.
Okay. Is there anything else, Michelle?
There's nothing else. I was going to move to adjourn.
Okay, there a second? Soon, okay. Okay, I think we are adjourned. To thank everyone, and we'll be acted on at the full board in 2 weeks from today, the 16th. Bye.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.